Ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Yeah.
Now for me, that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can scratch. With this AI, like scratching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the right
I
spot.
didn't even notice. 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.
I was just meant to be.
Sometimes it is just meant to be like that.
There he is.
Yes, indeed. We've got the multicolor light going on. Look out.
Yeah, you're at the club.
Little craziness happening. Nothing too crazy. I just didn't like the one color was bugging my eyes a little bit, so this will be better. How's everything with you in mission control over there? You got all the screens going?
Oh, all those lights, that's what it looks like in my head.
Yep. Oh, I've got the multi-view happening. I like it. Very cool. How's the volume going over here?
Yeah, sounding good.
All right. How about you? Yep. Absolutely. Nice. And I like that fade in from the bottom there too.
Yeah, I played around a little with the overlaying so you get visuals and the camera.
Oh, excellent. Magic piano style. Very cool. So we have a bunch of things to talk about tonight, but did you have anything in particular you wanted to start with, or should we just start anywhere in the middle? It's up to you.
Well, start with what you want. I do have one thing I'd like to take a look at later, because you know me, I'm a cakewalk advocate typically with the DAWs, but Mike over at Creative Sauce has given me a compelling reason to get Studio One on to my machines and rethink, what you use, which DAW for what.
Right. And that was my question, is if it was kind of a comparison.
Yeah, he has a feature that none of the other DAWs have.
Nice. Yeah, we could definitely start with that. That'd be fine by me. What do you think?
Yeah, I've got it over in the video clips. I actually uploaded it a little earlier, so that way you can play it right on the restream.
Very cool.
Yeah, hopefully my connection keeps up tonight. I've got 2 feet of snow sitting on my satellite.
Snow is no good for the satellite, that's for sure. We could always start with something in the old A minor. Always a favorite. And the question is normally, what would be a good beat to start with? And a lot of times, even just starting with something simple, whether it's some variation of an 8-beat rhythm or a 16-beat, just something where it's very simple, or if you wanted to do something in a Latin feel, you start with something like a rumba or a samba or something like that, where it's just you start there and you kind of build out from that. So the question is, what would be a good rhythm for starters? Right now it's on an 8-beat. Way too fast. That's like
Katrina and the Waves.
That's what I heard, yeah. No, that is one way. But now what would happen if that was a 120? If I brought that down to 80 and kept it the same.
Yeah, 80 or 90-ish.
Yeah. We'll try 90. We'll see. 90's not bad.
Now it's more like Stray Cats.
Almost, yeah. But if it was even just a 145 even in that A minor. Little walk, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
kind of bouncing around with whatever, and that's where, yep. Ha, stopped you in the middle there, sorry.
That's what I hear with that beat.
I like that, yeah. And any kind of walk like that, it does work out very well because it is just kind of a back and forth, and it leaves room for whatever else is happening. This just seems like it's going to just say, nah, no finish.
Hey, Mad Cracker in the house. Good to see you, man.
Nice. Because the 8-beat simple, it probably doesn't have a special finish there. Hey, what's up, Cracker? Just kind of messing around a little at the start here. Playing with the volumes and the rhythms and seeing what's up. In this case, that was just 8-beat. 8-beat 2. We were going with a rhythm of around 90. But if we were to go something, it felt like it was actually pretty quick. Whereas at 120, it felt way too fast. That was like you were saying, it felt like Katrina and the Waves.
Yeah.
But once it slows down, it could be almost anything.
Well, it's got more of a swagger to it when it's slow.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
more like jazzy or swingy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And 90 is a good spot, actually, because the other 8-beat 1 in here, at 90 feels really slow compared to the other one that we just did. Because these are both just versions of an 8-beat rhythm. It's almost like if we see what it does with the Casio chord note over here.
Yeah, that's gotta do it.
I still wanted the big finish, but I don't think it has one for that particular movement.
Oh, are you going A to F to G with that progression?
At that point, I was going AGF and then back. I was kind of going up and back, so from the A down to the F and then back up.
Yeah, I was going backwards. I was going AGF.
Yeah, it's all good. And when I hit that one note, it's in the wrong mode. Instead of getting the one note, you get the chord. And that's a good one also because it is all white notes right there with the A minor, G major, F major. And just doing that solo, all that was pieces of A minor pentatonic. And yeah, Ridiculous is up there, so good. It is working. And then we're in C major up there, so it should be the same as the A minor. So all those are natural notes in the same key. Always good to see.
You know, it's a totally different way to approach A minor, too. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
normally play it that.
Hey, and Cracker's got a guitar part for that already. Nice.
Ah,
I like
Cracker's got a guitar part for everything.
it. That's true. That's true. Having a guitar means you got a guitar part. It's perfect. Just like having a keyboard means you can put anything in, whether it's horns or strings or little pieces of whatever. Certain things, of course, different sounds come out better. It's better for guitar, for example. I'd always prefer to have an actual guitar line in there rather than rather than guitar through a keyboard. But for many of the other things, accent pieces, like I said, horns, strings, things like that, always cool. Pads, all that kind of stuff. It's fun to experiment with that. The same way that a guitar player will experiment with a pedal. Like I was experimenting with that floor pod that I had. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but broke it out the other day and was playing around with the tones. And it really does change how you practice. Like you get a tone that's all of a sudden really heavy and really loud and just changes how you play. And then you switch back into something else that's got a whole lot of reverb and echo, and you play something that fits that style.
Oh yeah, that's one of my biggest challenges. That as I change patches, what I can play, say, with a piano patch versus what I would play with a sawtooth patch.
Yep.
Very different.
Yep. And in the same way, different patches you would use with the weighted keys versus the not weighted keys, because there's a big difference in some sounds where you can't get the sound you want, necessarily with this patch on the weighted keys, or you can't get the sound you want with that patch on the not weighted keys, because the weight has so much to do with the way that sound comes out.
Yeah, I definitely, when it comes to weighted keys and not liking them, strings, horns, and even some of the pads, I prefer not to be on weighted keys.
Yep. And this one that I'm using is not weighted, but it does have pretty good sensitivity in terms of, the harder you hit the note, the louder it'll be. So you can get a good amount of expression out of the not weighted keys. It's just a question of, playing soft is a lot more difficult than playing very loud. Because 100% you could play 100% or 120%, it's going to be the same thing. But trying to play light is where aftertouch. There you go, Slither. Yep, exactly. And then there's always and then you get the bends, just because they're fun.
Yeah, and aftertouch is a very important MIDI event. When people do play guitar through MIDI, the key to getting a good guitar sound in MIDI is aftertouch and the pitch wheel. That's the great MIDI programmers out there add a lot of that to simulate guitar effects on the keyboard.
Yep. And some of that you could almost add after the fact too, if you really wanted to.
They tend to. It's hard to, unless you have a MIDI guitar or you have a controller that can really emphasize, some of those keyboardists who are really good with the pitch wheel.
Oh yeah.
Can sequence it in real time, but typically they have to go in afterwards and add those nuances.
Yep. And that's one where I think we were talking about Jeff Beck the other day, and it was about the being on the bar as well as the pinky on the volume wheel, and how much of the combination of all of the things, like you're picking the note, you're fretting the note, you're possibly bending with the fretted note, you're also possibly using the bar a little bit, you're also possibly using the volume wheel a little bit. All those elements can all add into that solo, to give you the overall thing.
That's another one. The volume MIDI control is another one you'll see in guitars where you get the swells.
Yep.
You know how guitarists will do that, like with their volume knobs.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the same technique over on the keyboard side.
Yep. And that's where if it's something that you can't really get in while you're playing, and your playing is too monotone in volume at least, you could add that in after the fact, with volume automation. Even you tell the DAW to do a MIDI learn event and use whichever control on your MIDI controller you want to use for it, and as it's playing along, you bring it in and then bring it back out. Do a little automation that way, real easy.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough hands typically to try to do that stuff, that's where the expression pedal. I'm glad I got that for this keyboard, because the expression pedal sometimes saves you from having to waste a hand on something that you need for playing.
Yep, and that is something that I could actually do with the that floor pod. That is one thing it has, is an expression pedal, so I can use that for volume, and then if you just click it in at the toe, you can use it as a wah pedal as well. So I have the option there. What's up, Virus? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm root beering it tonight.
Oh, he's root beering it, and I'm not. Oh my goodness.
Oh, but it's caffeine free.
Yep, mine's caffeine free too.
I'm watching my figure.
Cheers. And you said you had a bunch of snow on the dish, man. That's no fun over there.
Yeah, almost 2 feet in like 7 hours today.
Damn.
It came down like crazy.
Yeah, the good thing is that you guys are not, that surprised by snow like that, right? I mean, it happens often enough up by you, but it is still a lot, right? All at one time.
Yeah.
Do you guys have to worry structurally about the roof and all that, or is that
we
designed?
We have a mile-long driveway.
Right. Nobody wants to shovel that.
A lot of shoveling.
You just go over that. That's why you get the four-wheelers, or the snowmobiles, and you say, screw it, I'll just use that to get to the mailbox.
I got an industrial tractor with a
There you go. Nice. No, that's not bad.
It makes it a little easier.
More fun, at least, right? Tough to get stuck in something like that. Those things. I mean, it's got those monster tires, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. This has the like big treaded tractor tires. It'll go through anything.
Yeah, that's what you need. Either that or like, you remember the mat tracks? Did we talk about those ever? They were like something you could replace on, a pickup truck, for example. They're like triangular shape, like mini tank treads.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. With the tank.
Yeah, it's like mini tank treads, but it's one for each wheel. So like, there's a tread on the front. Let's go a little triangle, like of 3 wheels around a tread. But it made it so, but it made it so that you could go up. They said like an 18-inch flat curb, like you could hit a wall and go like straight up 18 inches or whatever, and go straight over it. So you can go over logs and stuff like that. But you also can't get bogged down in like loose dirt or mud, stuff like that. You just kind of glide right over the top. It was pretty cool to see the changes there. Hey, looking to collab. You could send it over to Ange, and she'll put it in for a mix for later. We talked about that the other day.
Yeah, we told you that last night.
Yep,
We're going to tell you that again tonight. And if you say it again tomorrow, we're going to tell you again. DM at Angified.
Tony the Tractor Man. In the key of, was that in D? Yeah, D, C, and then, sure.
Oh, that's how you play that, huh?
That's how I was. I mean, that's how I heard it. Tony the Tractor Man.
Still blows me away how fast you figure that out. That's another thing I was looking at over the week. I was
Melody stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I was watching some videos on guys who were giving tips on how to pick up music faster by ear.
Yeah, yeah. I love those tips, man. That's the kind of stuff that we definitely need to check out, because it opens up so much to you.
A lot of them, fortunately for me, a lot of them just reinforce the advice you've been giving me the last year.
Yep.
It's listen to what you're trying to play, narrow in, and once you calibrate one note, then you start thinking of distance.
Exactly.
Where
you get that
the melody
landmark.
going? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And also, figuring out which chords kind of go together. Like if somebody's playing, if it feels like home bass is A major, then you kind of get a feeling that if there's going to be other chords that sound happy or major in A, then it's going to be the D and the E. Like that's what's gonna feel. From the A, you would feel that the D would be the 4 chord and the E would be the 5 chord. So like those are the ones that would sound happiest together, and then the rest are going to be the minors, and and the one that we don't talk about, right? In this case, it would be the asshole. In this case, from A major, it would be. It would be, in this case, it's the G from the A major, because we're not doing A minor, we're doing A major now. So this is with
the
3
G
sharps.
the G sounds nice with A major.
Yeah. They do work nicely together. And that's where, in that case, if they're both major, it feels like we're in the key of D in that case. D, G, and A.
Is that why the G sounds so nice? Because it is major. So A
Yep.
major.
And if they're right next to each other.
Major,
Yep.
A major, they really do work nice together.
For me, the trick is anytime I hear 2 major chords right next to each other like that feel right for the progression we're doing, I think of those as the 4 and the 5. Because if you, whatever key, if you were in the key, if we could look back to the key of C, right? If you were in the key of C, then the F and the G would be the major chords that are, one whole step away from each other. In this case, it's the A and the G. So it would make us sound like we're in a home key of D. So like D would feel like home bass, or if you wanted to play it in minor, you could play it in B minor then, right? Those would also feel right. But that's where thinking about the, how they relate to each other, and then how you kind of get back to what feels like the one, whether it's major or minor. Because the song might feel like we were saying, it might feel like it's going to land at that D major after you do the G and the A. If you do it that way, if you go from G, A, and then to the D, it's more of a resolution, because that 5 pulls to the 1 strongly. And like that's the main idea there.
resolving?
That was from G,
D?
G, A, and then D.
Oh, D.
Yep.
Ah, yeah, that's resolved nice.
Yeah. And that's where those two major ones that are next to each other, if they consider those the 4 and the 5, figure out what the 1 is, and that's where it feels like now everything is in that key of D major. And in D major, that means you have 2 sharps. So in that case, if you looked through the key of D major, browsed it, it would be D major, E minor. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then you get the D major, E minor, F sharp major, or sorry, F sharp minor, G major, A major, and B minor.
Oh, the asshole.
Yeah.
Although he's not the asshole in this one, huh?
And this one he's not. Well, we're doing it kind of, instead of doing we're not doing it fully diminished. We would get it messy if we did that, but we could just, those are all there, and then right there. Because we're only worried about, we're doing all white notes except for the C sharp and the F sharp, because we know that in the key of D, we've got the 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. So. Just those 2.
Yeah,
Tony does look a little like that.
D major is a fun scale to solo like that.
Oh, yeah. And if you're doing major pentatonic, you'd be using those first 3 and the A and the B. And that's where you get sounds like that. And as soon as you start playing notes like that, you'd hear like 5 different songs just pop into your head that incorporate some piece of that kind of a thing because it's using a pentatonic. And just kind of bouncing around in that same, that was just 5 notes, but you're just using those 5 notes, starting knowing it's a major key and just using the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6.
Oh, geez, Cracker's gonna crucify me.
Yes, indeed.
Bless you, my son, for you have sinned.
For we have all sinned. I'm going to sin right now. Cheers.
Shit, I was sinning as I was saying it.
Is that why you play with one hand? D major is a good one. I do like that.
Hey,
Now,
D major was the Angel Find.
yep. Absolutely.
Very nice, simple chords.
Yep.
Tell it's been
Definitely.
a couple of months since I played. Funny,
Yes,
in the
indeed.
past, unless you keep reinforcing a song,
Mhm.
this has been my problem since I came back to music.
Mhm.
It is the ideas come fast and furious, and you play with them for a little while, and you come up with something, and then you jump on to something else, and I can't remember things I was playing 2 weeks ago.
Yep, and that's actually why recording yourself is so important. If you have the space, and it's something that it depends what you're doing. If you're just playing scales, or just noodling around, or just playing the same old song that you did 1 or 2 times, as like what I used to do with guitars, like that was all I did for many years, and that's why I wasn't making progress for many years because I just kept doing the same 3, 4 things. My hands would start hurting a little bit, and I'd stop playing, and I wouldn't play again for months, and then I'd do the same things again when I pick it back up. So having a direction, having an aim, having a goal when you actually start playing, like if you start practicing and say, hey, I want to be able to play, this song or that song, or, I want to sound like this player or that player, get things like that in your head and then start just working a little bit at a time and just, working to build up the endurance at first. And then at that point, it's just, putting some theory in, putting some time in for theory, some time in for practice, some time for just goofing around. Goofing around is important because then you start exploring, like I said, just major and minor pentatonic. If you're playing in a major key, explore that major pentatonic. If you're playing in a minor key, explore that minor pentatonic, and then sometimes switch. And you're playing in a major key, try the minor pentatonic and see what it sounds like, because you'll find totally different stuff happening when you're playing against a major or a minor chord with that.
Yeah, remembering the keys, is how I try to remember my parts.
Hmm.
But remembering mood,
Hmm.
whenever I'm playing, I'm usually in a certain kind of mood, which leads to whatever I play.
Oh
Later
yeah.
on, when I try to play, I either have to remember that mood or put myself back into that mood
Yep.
to get the same feel.
And that's again where the recordings come in. Where the other night we were listening to some recordings that we made at a rehearsal. I think it was 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, where we had Angie was singing and I was playing bass, and we had Jeff was on the piano, we had Pepe on guitar, and it's just one of those things that hearing it again, you kind of hear how those practices come together. Where it's just rehearsals, it's just somebody starts playing something and we just jump into it, or we have somebody calls out a song and we if somebody doesn't know it, we'll throw it on and listen to it for a minute and then jump right into playing it ourselves. And it's good practice to do covers in situations like that, to learn how they constructed the song, learn how those parts went together, learn how, oh, I like that part because, and you figure out what it is in terms of theory. Like, oh, it went from the 6 to the 4 to the 5. Oh, I like that, and that happens in a lot of songs. So it's one of those things, recognizing. Yeah, it's like recognizing moves like that. And once you start recognizing them, then you can just hear a song in a bar somewhere that you've never heard before, and you'll just hear, okay, this feels like it's landing on that note, okay, and then from there it feels like it's going to the 6 to the 4 to the 5. Yeah, so like you already know how to play the song. You know the whole structure already, and then it goes to another part, and you're like, oh, that felt like the 4. Okay, now they're going from the 4 to the 1 or whatever. You figure out. Once you kind of get some of those progressions kind of into your ears and be able to identify them more easily when you hear them, then you can suddenly just jump in and be able to play something much more quickly. As soon as you find that first anchor note, like we were talking about, you're in the song, because it's like, oh, okay, it's a 1-4-5, 1-6-4-5 in the key of in A flat. There it is. Okay, and we're playing that.
Yeah, the more you play those progressions in different keys, the more those progressions become familiar to you.
Yep. And again, with piano, it's more difficult in terms of playing in different keys, as different fingerings and different flats and sharps that you have to pay attention to. On guitar, it's just moving to a different position, a different fret. You do it at the 4th fret versus doing it at the 7th fret, and that just changes what key you're in entirely. Where on the piano, you have to do an entirely different fingering to move that far. So it's one of those things that's the different instruments have their pros and cons, and the reasons why they're fun. But it's also beneficial, I found, to know both of them, because understanding both sides of it, I can see there are times where it's beneficial to have the piano perspective and other times where it's better to have the guitar or bass perspective for a part that I'm looking at. With the keyboard, a lot of times it's the being able to hit so many notes so far apart from each other. Like I could hit up to 10 notes at a time if I really wanted to. So like I could have some kind of a doodle-doodle and like play 10 notes of a chord all up and down the keyboard at the same time. Whereas on the guitar, I can't really get past, those 6 plus tapping. You can only get so many that you're having all at once. Or a 7-string guitar, you can get a few more. A 12-string guitar, technically, but that's, repeating notes isn't really the same idea. Although it is kind of the same idea. It sounds different with a 12-string. Let's put it that way. Or at least, you're limited to octaves more.
With the keyboard, I tend to, focus on the inversions.
Mm-hmm. Inversions are huge, yeah.
Attacking the progression. Seems like, with guitars and some instruments, the inversions kind of are dictated by like, this is the easiest way to play this progression on a guitar.
Mm-hmm. Like, let's say we were going to do, he's saying do it. I think he means, like, here's 5 notes of C major and another 5 notes of C major all at the same time.
I can't stretch like that.
But I mean, I could just barely get from that bottom C up to that E, and then from the G up to that C. And it wouldn't be comfortable to like play that for an extended period, but it is something that I can reach it and I can play it. But just knowing where those notes are, being able to rock back and forth, you have all that freedom in there. And then you can play anything in C major pentatonic, where you're just using the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. And with those notes, and then the C.
What is that song? Marlin.
Oh, there you go. Oh, darling. That's another one. Yeah, yeah. This last one was G. Song wise,
I never get the name right because I always think
yeah,
the title is not like the part of the song. It's just a weird title, but
and that's why titles kill me usually. Yeah,
yeah,
it is a beautiful song.
Oh my love, my darling, I hunger for your touch. I'm sure somebody out there knows what I'm talking
Yeah, yeah. And again, with me, I'm just so bad with titles. I always just I try to sing my way through to find it, but again, if it's not in the song, then it's not even going to help me because I go all the way through it and be like, "But what's it called?" But it happens.
Well, and sometimes it's not the title that makes you remember the song. You know, once in a while it is the title that like sticks out, but for me, usually it's the song, it's the music.
Now, for
Sometimes a good word, a good lyric.
music from that period, would you feel more grand piano sound, or would you be thinking something else like electric piano or clav or something like that, or you'd be sticking mainly to a piano sound or orchestra maybe?
With those old 50s kind of rock
Yeah,
sounds.
yeah, with that kind of thing.
I love the piano that they used to do back then, but the piano tended to be more rock piano, not like these pretty.
Not quite honky tonk though, not that far down, right?
Yeah, usually they'd be more like like bouncy piano with
Yeah, yeah.
really ringy rock piano sound,
Very cool.
which I'm really getting back into. Some of the songs have been working the last couple of weeks. You know, I'm trying to get back to the 50s.
Nice.
That kind of sound, and the rock piano side of it, you know, fits really well with that old school kind of rock.
Yeah. And that's where for the guitar on that, a lot of times like just little high chirp chords, stuff like that, like nothing too crazy. But if you have the guitar, or if you have the piano kind of banging out nice and heavy like that, you do have a lot of room to do stuff with a guitar line if you wanted to.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the guitars are more like the muted kind of, clean kind of. The guitars are all
Choppy,
doing
little chirp chords,
clean
yeah.
notes.
And that's where again
they didn't do a lot of chord holds and things like that.
That's just the pizzicato strings. But if you were to go like that kind of a style is kind of what you're talking. And the problem is if you try to do that with something like the regular strings, you can't really chop it like that. You lose a lot of the sound already. Depending on the strings. Like this, like a lot of strings will start lower and come in with a slower swell. So like even this one seems kind of fast for that, but they kind of build up from nowhere.
Yeah, staccato or pizzicato strings. When you want the sharp hit strings, staccatos and pizzicatos. That's my jam.
Orchestral hit. It's automatically, even if you hold them down, it doesn't matter. That's all you get. One bang. And trumpets right there, though. But yeah, definitely with the strings, if you did want to get that, pizzicato is definitely good for the little chirp chords. But you could also just go to a guitar and see what you get with that. But in this case, like you were saying, you don't always get great sounds out of guitars from keys.
I like actually mixing the piz and the staccato. This patch.
Oh yeah, nice.
That would work for cartoon.
It sure would. Put that in anything for a background. And in this case, this is a nylon on this side. It does have that kind of a distant, quieter sound, but steel or jazz.
Nylon tends to translate better onto keyboards than steel.
Yeah.
I definitely, if I was to pick, I'd rather play a nylon.
Yeah, that one sounds nice.
nylon has a nice sample. When you go with the steel sounds, you have to play really gentle. Otherwise, the steel sound can really twang out. And you really can't.
I see what you mean.
You can't go too high with the steel on the keyboard.
If I play really quietly, it's not too bad, but like you said, it can be kind of clangy. But the nylon, this is definitely, I like the nylon sound on yours way better, for sure.
Well, yeah, that one is like it's a south of the border nylon acoustic, so it's got that kind of like almost Mexican feel.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But there's different. This one has a little ambience to it. But those work better than, like, say, the electric guitars. One thing with keyboards that I've always had a tough time with is getting good electric guitars. I didn't feel like I had a good guitar synth until I got the Halion. The Halion sampler really, Steinberg did their homework with the guitar samples, the heavy guitars and the clean electric guitars. Sound out of this world compared to your average synth.
Yeah. And I've been pretty happy with the sounds that are in this keyboard, but there are just, those couple of things like guitars, like you said, are just, you don't always get good guitars with things, but that one that you have there is very, very nice sound.
Yeah, the Halion filled several gaps for me. It gave me guitars I was happy with, and it gave me brass and certain rings, the cello and the viola, worth the sampler just for those things.
For sure. Cello's a good choice for sure.
Yeah, and I was happy with my strings that I got with the Roland, but when I heard the strings from the Halion, the cello is so much fuller and
And the viola. And the cello. In this case, the cello feels a little bit more percussive.
Want to like test on the low end,
Very nice.
I would love to have an orchestra to work with and be able to point to the celloist and say, do this, and then point to the violinist and say, do this.
Yeah, they have, some of the VSTs, they actually do have an orchestra that's similar to that, where, you can see the whole orchestra there and like select a section at a time. It's more like you're the conductor, where you're doing more or less that, where you can say these guys and, more, or those guys, no, a little less, and you can kind of emphasize things.
The conductor has to think arrangement, when they're pointing to this part of the orchestra and saying, do this and play it this way, they're thinking of the layers of the orchestra sound, where the parts should come in.
And counting on all the other parts to continue doing what they're supposed to be doing while you're signaling to just that one person. That's the other thing, is like sometimes in a regular band, just, a band that's out jamming or whatever, if somebody makes a signal, sometimes that throws other people off. Even if the signal wasn't meant for them, they saw a signal and they're like, wait, what? And then, oh, wait, and forgot to do what they were doing. So a lot of credit to orchestras for being able to, ignore what is not about them and focus on what they're supposed to be doing in the right time that they're supposed to be doing it.
Oh
And you
yeah,
don't,
they're some of the most down to earth musicians when it comes to. La- it's not like a band where you have egos and ego singers against guitarists and things like that. Orchestras, the reason why they're so tight is because there's no egos.
it's all for the project.
Even the dude with the bell is important.
Yeah, can't be snoozing. He's got to count 47 measures of nothing and then boom, and he's got to be ready for it. That's his job.
That's a hard job.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Or the big crash cymbals. We got to get them way out there. Spread them all around the room.
I would have liked to have done the timpani. I wish that I had the same appreciation for percussion now, back when I was in school and had the opportunity to pick something like that. Timpani
Sure.
would have been fun.
Nice. When I was in, I think it was fourth grade, I played trumpet for a few months, and it was just trumpet, which wasn't right for me as far as instrument wise. But I would revisit it now, like understanding more of what I understand and realizing a trumpet is just 3 valves, so everything is just one's down, two's down, three's down, some combination of that, or they're not down. And then there's the pressure with the lips and how you can go up octaves that way. But almost all of it, as far as that goes, is simplified down to very easy controls, as opposed to, say, like a saxophone, where you've got like all kinds of controls all over it that you have to be familiar with. And I would love to learn that as well, but that to me is a much steeper hill to have to climb. Where the trumpet, since I already knew some trumpet, like it wouldn't be that difficult for me to figure out, same way, like figure out a scale and then work from there and kind of get something happening.
And the trumpet, I know several singers who started with trumpet. Like it's one of those instruments that sometimes leads to singing techniques and.
And being a breath instrument, I almost said breath weapon. Being a breath instrument, it does have those required stops. Like you can't just play like all afternoon like you could on a guitar, because you'll pass out. You actually have to breathe.
You will turn purple.
Yeah. I mean, some people have amazing capacity and can play for a long time and have to only take short bursts of like to get some air and then continue going. But at the same time, it does require those stops, and knowing that, that it makes it better, having those little spaces in there. And that's why sometimes they'll tell you to try to sing the lines that you're playing. If you find yourself overly noodling, let's say, where you're just playing too many notes, whether it's keyboard or guitar or whatever, try to put those spaces in, try to sing the lines, and where you have to stop and pause and take a breath, you're not playing. You can actually stop playing for a second. Something that people have to appreciate more if they get too locked into scale patterns in particular, or pentatonic positions on guitar. That happens a lot.
And it's
People
one of
get locked
those
in.
instruments that is both in the foreground and the background. Because, trumpet parts, you can see them hitting leads and being right in front sound, and you can see them doing blasts to the rhythm, from the back. Like, you know that band that you cover that has like the brass section?
Oh yeah,
And
Kickstart Charlie. Yep.
Yeah, you look at how they utilize the horns as part of the rhythm, and they're subliminal. They're in the back. They're part of the rhythm and the beat. And then once in a while they'll go into those solos and they'll kind of throw the solo around, and you'll get that like trumpet or that sax that comes out in front and just takes over the sound.
I do love that. One part of the show, they will bring a lot of times the entire brass section out into the middle of the crowd, and he'll have them get up onto a chair one at a time and do, an extended solo for the trumpet, and one for the trombone, and one for the sax, and then one for the whole section, and then they go back up. He also calls the crowd up to dance sometimes, which is awesome. Like on some of the stages, like those those metal stages, those pop-up stages we sometimes do outside. Like we'd have that set up, and he'd call like 20 people up on stage, and like Mike and I look at each other like, because there's all the wires and all the speakers and everything. And it's a good thing we did a good job of like lining everything up where it's not, if it was cables everywhere, that would be a nightmare. You'd have people falling all over the place, because it's already a 9 to 11 piece band, and then you're bringing another 20 people onto the stage. It's like, oh my god, it's getting a little crowded, but everybody had an awesome time. Everybody has a lot of fun, and luckily those stages are built. They're like steel cages. They're like solid. They have no worries about it like being a rundown like wood stage or anything. This thing is like the solid fold up Terminator stage that you fold up. It's got its own generators built in. Good stuff.
You're talking that truck with the stage built into it.
Yep.
That thing is
Yep, we do those a lot of the time. Actually, I just saw that there are two of those parked on the other side of town over here. Where like when I was going to rehearsal the other day, as I was going out, I'm driving along, and there's some golf place over on the left. And when I look down in the parking lot, it's got two of those stages parked like side by side. I was like, let me see who owns those and see if they're, who's doing sound with them. Because if they're just parked there, that'd be good to know if that's. Yeah, it's time to like break those out and like let's work. Let's get those out there and start booking some gigs.
I'll tell
for
you,
sure.
I really would like to own. If I had a stage like that, that to me, it's like a business. I would turn it into a mobile studio.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing is the studio portion, since that stage already has the generators built in and everything, where we ran the whole thing from the generators in that stage. So we know we can run a whole live band from there, as many pieces as you want. So that's the kind of thing where if you had that for the band to perform on, or if you wanted to make it into a studio, then it would be more like having, the studio rig that you have like in an SUV or a van or whatever, and you just come up and, hook your power in over there and then go from there.
That's what I'm saying. Like the actual studio would be a separate vehicle that just connects to the stage once it's transformed.
Mm-hmm. Solid. Yeah. I'd love that.
That's a production beast. Like there's always people out there ready to rent that stuff, whether it's for a Hollywood production or a band that just wants to play out one night in the park.
Now I've seen them do that with video game trucks. If you ever saw that, where they have video games in the back, and they pull up to and you say, hey, video game party, where they just pull up and have all the equipment there. Same idea, but in this case with everything that you need for the musical gear, except the the instruments. Like everybody's going to bring their own guitars. Usually people would bring their own amps if they want their own tone, but you can have amps already in the rig if you wanted to do it that way. But again, a lot of people have their own preferences for that kind of thing, where they want to have the amp tone in their tone that they want to record.
Oh yeah, some guitarists are like, I can only do this with a Charvel or a PV.
Yep. I know people who have 15 guitars sitting around, so that when for that particular song, like the one that sounds best is this guitar, so he'll go get that guitar and play that, and then this other song he'll go get the other guitar for that song. But it doesn't have to switch all the time. But it is one of those where it's good to get the different guitars out and exercise them, and appreciate the nuances and the differences between all these. If you're going to have that many guitars, you should be playing them to at least get comfortable with it all. Like I got my acoustic right back here, and I broke it out on Christmas, but I hadn't really broke it out for a while before that. And it was like, I should really break that out more, because it is harder to play the acoustic than it is the electric for sure. Especially with the electric, I have 9s on it, and then this is an acoustic. So I'm going to put 12s on the other guitar at some point, but
hearing you play the acoustic
probably not. No, the one reason is because we usually do the shows kind of later in the evening here, and I don't like to play loud at night and all that. So like breaking out the guitar and like blam is one thing I don't usually do. I don't have it tuned up, but maybe after break I would tune it up and just see what it sounds like. But again, I usually play it pretty quiet. But having this microphone down at this level is actually pretty good, because then if I were playing, it wouldn't be that far of a stretch to get it down there. We'll see. Perhaps we'll break out the acoustic and play something a little quiet a little bit later on. We'll see how it sounds. But the acoustic is...
We'll wake the neighbors.
There you go. Yep. It's the Angelica is the brand of the guitar, which I've never seen before. But it's just... I really enjoyed the feel of it. It feels very well put together. It's got a great sound.
Ange approved.
Yep. Exactly. It's Ange. The Angelica.
In guitar form.
In guitar form. Now, let's see. It's been almost an hour here, and we were thinking about going into one of the videos. And the question is if you wanted to do intro and then go to that video, or did you want to just go right to that video? How do you want to do that?
Well, we'll do the intro. That way we'll have a nice cue point for hours. And
then straight into the video?
Yeah, it makes it nice and easy to tell where the cuts are.
Very good. In that case, we shall be back in a moment. This is a good moment for a break time, or a good moment to hang out and check it out. And then we will see when we come back after this little break time.
We're going to learn a compelling reason to consider Studio One as a DAW.
Yeah, excellent. Be right back. Ambient noise, yeah?
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Yeah.
Now for me that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can stretch.
perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the right
I didn't
spot.
even notice. 40.
Talking shit with Glenn and Tony.
I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.
These music producers are blessed with an incredible choice of DAWs or digital audio workstations, but while some may do certain tasks a little more to your liking, it's actually rare to find a completely unique feature. But there is one that comes to mind. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. I think the best DAW is the one that you currently love. We each have our own way of working and our own preferences, so I'm not here to tell you that one DAW is better than another. However, I do think that one DAW has a feature which is so unique and so useful that you may even consider using it alongside your current DAW. I'm going to be telling you later how you can gain access to it to try it out for less than $15 via our sponsor for this video, Sweetwater. Now, the feature is called the project page, and it's a part of Persona Studio One Professional. But before we look at what it does, let's take a look at what problems it solves. Eventually, we all have to export our music to a format that can be used or listened to, typically something like a WAV file or an MP3. And if you want to release your music commercially, then you almost certainly want to master it. Now, mastering is not only the process of sonically improving or enhancing your music, but it's also making sure that it meets the technical requirements of the platform that you're releasing to. Now, before you go ahead and master, I always recommend that you first export to a stereo file and then master that. Mastering from within your actual song project in your DAW has a few problems. First of all, it's a poor separation of tasks. You'll always be tempted to go back and tweak that snare or that vocal. When you start mastering, you really want to think that your mix is completely done. Secondly, it can put a tremendous strain on your computer. Some of those mastering plugins are really quite cumbersome, and you're already using quite a lot of plugins, so it doesn't really work out that well. You always feel that this was not a task that your DAW was designed for. Apart from the music and the file itself, there's other things involved in a release. We may be setting up metadata for things like the artist, the composer, and even things like artwork for singles or for albums. And talking about albums, we may also be determining the order of songs in an EP or an album. All of these are considerations depending on the platform that we're releasing to. The Studio One project page takes care of all of these issues in one convenient place. Here's a typical project in an EP for Studio One. In the top left, we can see each song, which has been added by simply dragging and dropping a WAV file, which you can export from any DAW. As you can see, each song has a title, as well as there being an album title and artist above. We can easily change the order of songs by dragging them around, and expanding each song reveals that we can add and edit metadata for that song, including artwork. As we select each song, we can see and get access to the plugins we're using to master that song, and also get some useful loudness information. Below this area, we can also add plugins for all of our songs as a whole, either pre or post fader. I find this really useful for things like metering plugins. We also have a listen bus. This is for plugins that we want to hear while mastering, but we don't want in the final export. Typically, this will be monitor correction plugins like SonarWorks Sound ID. Note that both the song and the master area have faders which can be automated. In the bottom area of the page, we can see our songs represented by waveforms. Here we can do simple common tasks like trimming the ends of our tracks or adding things like fade outs. We can also edit automation here, which I'll get back to later. The top right provides us with many kinds of metering tools using different standards. And finally, at the top, we can start exporting our release in many different ways, from burning CDs to digital and streaming targets. By the way, we can easily adjust the loudness here to match the requirements of platforms such as Spotify and YouTube, or various broadcast requirements. As you can see, the project page in Studio One is much more than just a mastering tool, which is probably why they didn't call it the mastering page. Talking of mastering, there is one key aspect of that process which the project page deals with really well. In earlier versions, the project page received criticism for not having any automation features. Presonus listened to this and added several ways that you can automate while mastering on the project page. Firstly, as mentioned previously, we can automate both the track and master faders by simply writing our movements there. Secondly, we have clip gain automation on each track. This enables us to automate the track level before it hits the plugins in our mastering chain. Thirdly, we can edit our automation in the lower view, either by automating individual tracks or our project as a whole. And by the way, we can also automate parameters in our plugins here as well. You really don't need to switch to Studio One as your main door to make use of the project page. However, if you do, there's some deep integration which is really useful. Essentially, when you update Studio One songs used in the project, the system is aware of this and updates the master files used in the project page. Clever. Now, as you may imagine, there are standalone products to deal with mastering. The main one that springs to mind is Wavelab, which I have tried. Now, I will say it's a very good program and it's focused on mastering, but it's also rather complex and has a lot of features that a lot of us wouldn't actually use. That makes it less user-friendly than the project page in Studio One, and it doesn't have features which cover some of those broader tasks we've been talking about as well. Apart from all of that, it's also a lot more expensive as a standalone program than Studio One Professional is as a whole. Now, talking about price, one of the reasons I'm excited to have Sweetwater as a new sponsor for this channel is because I'm always hearing really good things about them. And one of the things I hear commonly is that the sales staff sell you what is right for you rather than just selling you the most expensive item. That's a sign of a company that wants to have a long relationship with you, and it also aligns really well with my own values, because the last thing I want to do is recommend a product to you which is not going to be the right fit for you. That's why I'm happy to talk about the pricing for Studio One Professional here at Sweetwater. Currently, just for the next few days, if you do buy Studio One Professional, it's $299. Now, even at the usual price, which I think is $399, it's still very good value for money. Now, if you're convinced by the project page and you just want to go ahead and purchase Studio One Professional outright, follow the link in the description for that. But I did promise you at the beginning of this video that I was going to give you a way to gain access to this feature for less than $15, at least to try it out. Presonus Sphere is a product which includes not only Studio One Professional and its project page, but also some amazing notation software, a whole heap of plugins and sounds, some collaboration tools, and also some cloud storage. If you head over to sweetwater.com at the moment, you can sign up for Presonus Sphere for just $14.95 per month. You can try out all of the features we've talked about today, plus all of the other things included in Sphere. And if you don't like it, you can cancel your subscription. But if you love it, like I do, then you can continue. Check the links in the description down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you going to continue to use your current DAW? Are you thinking about using this alongside it? Or are you now tempted to move over to Studio One Professional completely? Love to hear about that. Now, for me personally, I do use a number of DAWs. I still really love Cakewalk. Sometimes I use FL Studio, and I also use Studio Studio One Professional. Now, if you think you're going to go down the Studio One Professional route, you may want to check out my sister channel, which is called Studio One Revealed. You can see that right here.
Excellent. Definitely some good info there. I am a fan of many of his videos. We've seen ones on different features. We've seen it on different ways to use different DAWs. Studio One is one of the ones that I have used. Not as much for the mastering side, but just for, we usually use Capture for grabbing it because we have, we use a Personas board in the studio in Pennsylvania, and we use a Personas board with Mike when we go out and do the live gigs with bands. That one's not as much as about recording from the board, but we use that board for all of the live gigs that we do.
Well, you're lucky to have a Personas board to really see the power of Studio One. I mean, that DAW and that board were designed for.
Oh yeah, and there's so much there. I mean, I'm still barely scratching the surface, but when I watch how Mike uses the board, like when he's mixing, the number of shows that he's done over the past few years with the board and getting familiar with all the features, doing it from the iPad, doing, mixing the monitor mixes, having separate busing and all that kind of stuff. He does so much with it that it's like I get a glimpse of the features that I really haven't gotten into yet for just that side of it, whether it's the live stuff or whether it's the recording side. But I see enough where I, like when I go over to Pepe's house, we can sit there with the, the board and actually, okay, dial in each track. Okay, this is a bass guitar. Let's dial that in. We talked about that the other day, and I'll probably be out there next week. We'll have to set it up. And when I do, I'm going to try to get a video from my phone of me going through some of the process of, like, if I just take one of the recordings that we've done, whether it's years ago or whatever, it doesn't matter. We have it as a separate recording. Everyone has their own track. So everything can be treated individually. So I can just go to the bass track and say, that's a bass. And all of a sudden, boom, it sounds more like a bass. And then go to the kick drum. Okay, boom, that sounds more like a kick drum. And, just starting from there and then remixing real quick in case any of them got a lot louder or quieter because of the new EQ that was put on them. You just do a quick little touch-up remix on that, and all of a sudden, everything just sounds 1,000 times better than it did when we recorded it, even though nothing changed. We didn't put any fancy new effects on it. It was just basically setting up a custom channel strip that they have in the board that you can just go right in and load with a couple of clicks of a button and a twist of the wheel. Say, okay, this is a kick drum. This one is the high tom. This is a mid tom. This is a floor tom. This is a hi-hat. This is a crash. This is a rock guitar sound or a rock overhead sound or whatever. You can find different presets, and you can set your own. You can dial something in that you really like from one of those presets and then save it in a new slot and call it what you want. So it's really a very useful tool. These are expensive boards, but it's because these are for doing serious music stuff. So it's it's not the kind of stuff that you just grab and just have for $100 or whatever. These are a lot more than that, but there are small versions where you can get access to some of the similar features, and that's where looking at the software is important.
Some of these techniques can apply to low-end equipment as much as the high-end equipment.
Oh, yeah.
What did you think of his advice as far as when you're mastering to consolidate it down to a stereo track? And,
for the exact reason you mentioned.
Consider your mix done at that point, and now you're on to the mastering. The whole purpose of mastering is to prepare it for distribution, whereas the purpose of mixing is to get your levels straight. And, when you get to the mastering stage, if you're constantly having to go back to the mixing stage, you're never going to get to the mastering stage.
At the same time,
you get some good tips there as far as to separate your thought process.
Yep, you definitely want to separate those tasks. And as far as the going back, at first, when you get to the mastering stage, you do your mastering and you realize something should be different in the mix. Don't just put it out the way it is and not change it. Like, you go back to the mix and you change it, but you realize what you did or what needed to be done. Because when you surrendered your mix, like we talk about that, right? The mix is never done, but when you surrendered your mix and decided to go ahead and start mastering, you thought you were done, but then when you mastered it, something sounds off, so you go back and fix it. Now, for the next time, you should make that adjustment ahead of time. If it was the guitar was too loud, you should know next time, okay, I got to mix the guitars a little bit lower so that when we get to the mastering, it comes out exactly as I want it. That's the kind of stuff you keep in mind, and that's where the going back and forth in the beginning helps you through an iterative process where you're getting a little better at it every time you're doing it. Okay, I got to change this, I got to change that, and once you get it dialed in or you understand the differences that you need to make, between mixing and mastering, then you get to that spot
The
where you can just
more-
boom, boom.
The more that you go through the mixing to mastering process, the more you begin to understand what you need to do during the mix to get to that mastering. Like after all the tracks that I've done over the last couple of years, my mix to mastering process is almost like a science at this point. Like
Yeah.
I set up this bus, I set up that bus, I set these levels. 90% of what I do has become habit. It's just part of the process.
And you've built
then-
not shortcuts like cutting corners, but shortcuts like you know how to get to where you
Well,
need to be with less steps than you did at first.
You know where you need to push a little. Like when I'm sending something to BandLab, I always purposely push a little bit to compensate for what I know gets lost.
Right. Exactly. And,
at
it's just
this
little
point,
changes like that.
It's not even a question. Like at this point, I know I have to do that because if I don't do it, I already know what those results are.
Yep. Exactly. And that's the experience. That's doing it. And that's where, if you don't have a song to work with, that's where I think covers come into handy. Like some people, they put off the whole learning about mixing and mastering because they don't have a song. So they start, wasting days, weeks, whatever, trying to come up with a song. And that's not wasted time. I mean, trying to create stuff is always important. But having a process, so it's almost better to just say, okay, here's a song that I really know well. Let me just work on this song, make a song. And you don't have to even release it.
You know what it's supposed to sound like.
Exactly.
If you're writing a song, you don't technically know what it's going to sound like except in your head.
Yep.
But if you are trying to learn how to mix and master and you're covering a song, you know how the song's supposed to sound, so you have a easier target to hit.
Exactly. You know what it should sound like, and you know when you do your parts, and then you listen back to it, and you could go back and forth. You could do an A-B comparison between what you just did and what the song should sound like, what it sounded like when you heard it in the recording. You'll hear the differences. You go, oh, my guitars are way too low, my vocals are way too high. Let me remix that now, and then figure out. And when you find that mix where it's now, if you're trying to sound exactly like the record, just to understand how to make it sound that way. Not that you necessarily want the final product of what you're going to eventually put out there to sound that way, but for the sake of learning about how to make the song sound that way, it's important because then you can sit there and mix, get it to where, okay, the vocals sound like they're the same levels, compared to the guitars, compared to the drums, get everything all leveled the way you want it to. Same thing, audio space. If you're listening, with the mix and the guitars a little off to the left and the vocals a little off to the right, you want to try to mimic that. You want to make sure that you understand how that works to get that to happen. Not that you necessarily want that in every song, but you can use that technique when a song calls for it. That's the important part.
Yeah. So what did you think of that feature of being able to set profiles for exporting? The main reason why I was compelled with this is now doing stems.
Right.
And, it's a lot more work. And I really wish this feature was part of Cakewalk because I would love to press one button and export all the stems I need in one shot. But right now I have to go through each part and export each one as a separate wave and keep it clean and get it over to BandLab. It is a lot of work. With a feature like this, you can pretty much make it into like one click.
Well, that's the thing is with what we do in the studio over by Joe, we record everything in through Cakewalk. And then for up until, I guess, a week or so ago when we started having issues trying to upload, we were able to just hit the publish to BandLab, make it a private project and just send it. And it was able to bring all the stems up and it wasn't an issue. But now we have been having an issue, but they also just changed provider on the ISP. So we were having some issues there.
You've been seeing some of the same problems I've seen with BandLab integration in Cakewalk. It's awesome, especially when it does work. Being able to pull down a project, individual tracks, being able to push them back up when it works, it's really cool.
Yep.
Unfortunately, depending on your connection or whether there's some bugs still in there, once in a while you'll get blank tracks.
And actually,
tracks won't go back.
in this case, we started getting an error message after it sent up like one or maybe two of the tracks. But I think it's because their connection was basically throttled. So they were only sending a small amount. And so eventually it just assumed that it was a timeout on the server side because it was taking so long.
Yeah, it times out really fast, 2-3 minutes. And some of my, with my connection, especially in the old days, 3 minutes, I've sent a quarter of the file in 3 minutes.
Yeah. And that's the thing is what we had started doing is basically just when we're recording in rehearsals, we try to keep it under 15 minutes, but a lot of times we get right up to 15 minutes because we know that we could make a BandLab project out of 15 minutes. But these are now, it's a 15-minute file that has, let's say, 9 channels recorded because we've got, 3 drum channels, 3 vocal channels, 3 instrument channels, whatever. We have, a lot of channels essentially if you're sending large files, especially like you said, uncompressed wave files because you want the full sound. So you're sending all of that.
That's the only thing I will send. So
of course,
it's always going to be about 100 megs per track, give or take.
For 15 minutes or for how long? 3 minutes?
No. The majority of the songs I do tend to be under 6 minutes, and with 32-bit waves, 5 minutes and about 15-20 seconds, you hit the 125 meg mark. If it's bigger than 125, BandLab won't take it. So
right.
At that point, if I have something that's over that time limit, I go from 32-bit to 24-bit. And then after 8.5, 9 minutes, I go from 24-bit to 16-bit. It's the compromise that keeps the file under 125 megs, and you don't hear a big difference between 32 to 24 to 32 to 16. Little bit of difference, but
it also depends if we're
24 to 16, less of a difference.
It also depends if we're talking about, tracks that you're trying to get that are the final track, or if it's like, in this case, this is stuff where like we're writing a new song in a rehearsal. And so it's just kind of a scratch track anywhere. We had, the mics are all open in the room and we could make mistakes and all that. So the idea is just to get the idea down, get the idea to BandLab so that we can all just listen to it on our phones later.
To get it onto BandLab so people can use it.
Right.
The originals are still sitting in my Cakewalk uncompressed. I will never, ever compress my originals, period.
And that's why they sound that way. They sound like full fidelity.
Well, you learn the hard way over time. Like, I archived all my CDs back in the 90s. And at the time, it was 128 kilobit to MP3. And, this is all I'll ever need. And my whole CD collection's on my hard drive. And within a couple of years, I was like, this sounds like shit.
Now, do you still have all the CDs is the question, or did you throw them off a cliff because you had them digitized?
No, over time, I either gave some of the CDs away, and when we moved, they auctioned off like boxes of the CDs that were in the closet. I never went back to the CDs. At this point, you want to find a song. Yeah.
For me, the CDs went to the cars. I had one of those little flip things, and I actually had it from doing tech support, where I had the emergency rescue disc and all kinds of software in there that I was using for doing technical support. But when I was using it for music, I could just empty all the data discs out and just take all my CDs out of the cases and throw them into one of those, and you get a whole crap ton of them into one of those little things that you could just keep in the car. But then I end up being the kind of person where I have.
You're lucky you had a CD player. Had a CD player in my car.
Yeah, I still do.
Something I've wanted since I was a teenager.
Hey, Pat, what's happening, man? Good to see you. And I do have a CD player in the car, but I am the kind of person even though I have probably 50 CDs in the car, the one CD that is in never comes out. It's that Grateful Dead CD I was telling you. It's got Eyes of the World. It's got it's got such good stuff on it that it just never comes out. It's always in, and I'm usually listening to that unless I'm driving somewhere that I'm not usually, and an area where I can't usually get the same radio stations as home. So I'll sit there and scan just to see hey, what kind of radios is there around up here, and find out if you find anything good to listen to over there. But normally it's just that CD because it's got One More Saturday Night. It's got all kinds of good stuff on there. Thank you, sir. Always good to hear, Pat.
There's the theme.
Charge.
The mayor has entered the building.
That's right. And we've got a bunch of tractor memes over here. I like it. I like the one pulling the 180. That's nice. Oh, it's almost a 270.
So if you guys enjoyed that advice on that
Creative Sauce.
Studio One, Creative Sauce, Mike over there, well worth a follow. If you're into Cakewalk, you're going to love his channel because he is a big Cakewalk advocate, has some of the best tutorials, but he's not afraid to go into other DAWs. I love how he's unbiased and uses each DAW for their purpose. Like he mentioned, sometimes I'll go to Fruity Loops because sometimes he wants to put together beats. and he goes to Studio One because of its mastering uniqueness, which to me, I'm sold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the PreSonus Sphere.
Mm-hmm. That looks like a great way. Yeah.
$15 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely going to try it for a couple of months because it looks like it's got some sweet toys in it.
Definitely. And again, at certain levels of the PreSonus products, if you go to buy, I mean, I'm not sponsored by PreSonus, but I do use their products for what we do. And for that, it's one of those things where once you start looking at, the way at certain levels, they will give you the software for free, the professional version, because you purchased a board. Like in some cases, you're buying a $3,000 board, they're going to give you $300 software. Absolutely,
it doesn't
comes
have
with
to
it.
be a $3,000 board.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Certain level, yeah.
They have $150, $200 MIDI control surfaces and digital mixers that will get you a copy of Studio One plus a whole bunch of extras.
And even if it's not the full professional version, it's enough of a version where, like you said, if you try that, the Sphere even for the couple months or a month or what have you, and just to try it out and see those features in action and see if they're helpful to you, and you can also apply those lessons into other DAWs where they might do it differently in another DAW. You might have to add other VSTs, for example, to get something to happen the way that it happens here. But you understand the process and the flow, and you'll see what you prefer about this DAW versus that one in terms of workflow and everything else. Because we've talked about, Jason's workflow when we watch him work in Reaper. And it's like, wow, that's so much faster than whatever I do in whatever DAW. But that's just because I'm doing things in a whole different way. And it was very eye-opening in terms of being able to work with stuff that quickly, which was very cool.
He sold me on Reaper. I don't even have to use it. Just watching him in action on it convinced me that, like, when I want to speed up my workflow, especially the dragging and snapping, how seamless it works for him. Again, this is a weakness in the Cakewalk world and in Cubase. I never had that kind of fluid sliding around the tracks.
One thing I will say about it is there's a couple of factors involved, like one being the fact that his machine, you've seen how many tabs he keeps open. So his machine is rock solid in terms of he's got plenty of processor, plenty of memory, plenty of hard drive space.
It's still handling all that with 1,000 tabs on the side.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, like, so it's a good machine for starters, but also never be afraid. The main thing is to, try to move something, and if it doesn't go where you want it, you can always undo. That's the other thing is be experimental, be quick to say, hey, let's try this here and see what it sounds like. If it's not what you wanted, instead of just trying to fidget with it, a little more left, a little more right, you can just always undo and you're back to where you just were. So like it fit where it was, try something. If it didn't work, undo. Now try something else. Did it work? No, undo. Just be used to change, unchange, and then get to where you want to go.
The real key to getting used to new DAWs or new software with audio is don't be afraid of it. Like, don't be intimidated by it. We tend to stick with the DAW that we know, and that's a truth. Like, it's very hard to convince people when they're comfortable with a certain DAW that they should use a different one. And I like how, Mike, I'm not trying to tell you what DAW to use or which one's the best. There's no best or worse.
Exactly.
It's just how
what works for you. Yeah. And that has a lot to do with, we've talked about before, about, different people think in different ways, or they prefer a different style. Some are more audio, some are more visual, some prefer things laid out in a big list, some prefer a grid. Everyone's got a different way that would appeal to them more. So that's where it's, I recommend it, at the very least watching videos on all the different ones, because you might see something that we saw with Jason, like somebody's using Reaper and you're like, whoa, wait, you can do, that fast? Wait. And you're like,
if you watch Jason enough, you will learn Reaper just watching him, because when you see the process and you realize, oh, that's what that button does. Oh, that's what that knob does. Others go to a DAW, they're overwhelmed. There's tons of shit in front of their face and no explanation for anything.
Hey, Zero, you can send links over to Angified, and she'll take them for one of the other shows. We don't usually take links on evenings like tonight. We're usually just talking tech stuff and talking music stuff.
Shit, man.
And we're playing a little live music. Little live music here and there. Depending. I did break out the acoustic and tune it up. I don't yet have the mic in position, but we can maybe play a little bit of acoustic in a little bit.
Glenn Unplugged.
Yeah. I mean, you can probably hear that almost in the background. But again, I would have the mic right up on it when I'm playing. We'll try it out. I also was testing out another video mode to try that out, but we'll check that out in a minute too. But first, we shall see about some other things here.
What
And
have you been exploring all week?
I've been doing a couple of things. I mean, for videos, I really didn't look at much for this week because I wanted to keep things more in a doing music and talking about stuff with the progressions that we've been using. So, hey, Tony, he's looking for your Linkin Park instrumental. He can definitely find that.
The one that I can send you, the one that I have, I'm currently working on Numb.
Nice. Another good one.
Yeah, I got lost. I deleted a couple of my old tracks.
They weren't.
Or during their transition, some of my old tracks disappeared from my library. Not sure why.
I was thinking if they were made, if the original track was started by somebody else, but I mean, these would all be tracks that you're talking about you started yourself. Yeah.
These were all part of the Phantom Tonus library.
Right.
There's just a handful of them that are no longer forkable, which they were because there's forks to them already, and there's a few that just disappeared.
Could it be that they were originated pre a certain update, and that's why they weren't able to do something? Or
They're mostly the earliest ones, like the first 8 months, the stuff that I did then. Some of that's gone by the wayside, so I'm redoing them.
Yeah.
Re-adding them. Plus, now I'm doing so. In some cases, some of the songs I will be republishing just so I can put the stems out there. The ones that people ask for drum tracks and things like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with that library. I mean, you've been through so many songs that it's it's kind of crazy. Like, are there any left that of those eras that you kind of work through that you haven't gotten to? Or
I got 10 requests that haven't done yet.
wow, nice. So there is more ground to hit. Yeah.
I did all about the bass last night.
What's happening, Jordy? Good to see you.
Good one.
Nice. All about the bass.
Hey, Jordy.
España. Excellent.
Hey, how'd you make out with that contest last on your Spanish track?
That's right. I did hear the one where you said it took you some time to get the pronunciation down for all of the parts that you were doing. That sounded awesome. Loved it. Definitely good stuff.
Yeah, I like singers, go into other languages like that. How hard some of them will work to really get the language right and sing it properly.
Yeah,
You did a great job, Jordy.
most definitely. That's the one.
Yeah, that contest should be, I think, finishing up. They're getting ready for February's contest.
Nice. That's right. The month's been flying by. Didn't even realize it. Time is slipping past.
Well, I'm still stuck in 2022. Somebody told me it's 2023.
And you'd said, wake me up in 2027. You're like, it's not time yet. But the other question is, what kinds of trends would there be in music by then? That's where it's tough to predict even a short range out. So trying to predict too far out, it's like, well, it could be anything by then. We may not be playing the same kinds of instruments by then. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll tell you, music can surprise me. For the last 20 years, wow, there's getting stale, and somehow there's always out there that keeps it fresh.
Yep. And we were talking before about things coming in cycles where things are going to be coming back around again, whether it's old MTV sound or whether it's, disco coming back around, things that, went out of style, let's say, are coming back in style because things all go in cycles, long cycles in some cases. Yeah. So some of the things that were, long since out of style are going to just magically come back into style.
Rappers, all you rappers out there, you got to realize you're at the end of a very long. Rap has had a dominant cycle for almost 25 years. That's it's got to evolve. Otherwise, other genres are about to come in and kind of push it off to the side.
And that's the thing is you never know what tomorrow brings. It could also be that that takes over even more of the market and other types of music kind of slipped away or other kinds of music build in with, rap as a style.
Yeah, I think that's what's kept it fresh. I mean, if you look at the rap, say, of the 90s versus the rap of today, there's a lot more orchestral. There's a lot more genres in rap of today than there was back then. So it's found a way to keep itself, interesting.
Hmm.
But at this point, every genre has been shoved into rap, so you're going to have to come up with something new.
Yep. Kind of like what we were talking about with metal, how many different subgenres of metal there are. There's so many that I didn't even realize half of what's there, but it kind of makes sense where it's just metal and this, and you make it into a style, and then you start making music with that.
Yeah, and what you're seeing with metal is you're seeing new techniques. You're seeing guitarists do new shit that just I didn't know a guitar could sound. And singers are really leading the metal change.
Yeah.
Singing techniques and styles that you're hearing now, they're new. They're evolved metal singing.
Hmm.
We hear that with Jason constantly. He's
Yep.
taking it to the next level.
And he's always working, always doing something there. That's the other thing is practicing your craft.
The future isn't going to happen on its own.
No. But that's the importance of practicing your craft. If you want to get better at something, do it all the time. Could it be you only have 5 minutes to work on it here or 10 minutes to work on it there, whether it's guitar, whether it's recording, whether it's understanding theory, just picking something that you would like to improve in yourself or your own music or your own musical knowledge. And the resources are there. I mean, we constantly point out to certain ones, but you can find so many different ones, and it's important to find something that resonates with you. So even though we can tell you the ones that we've found that are extremely helpful, we can also, from there, you'll find other recommendations that might resonate better for you, because everybody has their own, preferences. Somebody they might not like this guy because of whatever, and they might not like that guy because of this, but they'll find someone that they like and can jive with and get the information to sink in very rapidly and move on to other levels, because there's so many levels of what you can learn that it's kind of ridiculous. It's like you get to a point where you feel like you can play along with anything, and then you realize that there's other styles of music, whether it's jazz or whether it's just other things where you just don't understand that style at all, and you start playing and you go, oh, that's how that works, and something clicks, and all of a sudden you can play anything in that style of music because you understand it uses the 5 and the 6 in a major key, so it's part of this, and understanding how it works in that way can really help.
Yeah, and the beauty of if you're following any of the sites we point you to, YouTube starts recommending to you related sites, and you will get a slew of useful other YouTubers who are related.
Absolutely.
To the same kind of theme. Go follow Mike and watch your recommendations, and you will start to get some cool YouTube sites where they'll teach you how to mix, master, record, and find the best VSTs out there.
Yep. And again, if it's instruments that you need, advice on, or you need lessons on, there's so many different ones for that as well. Whether it's bass lessons, I would recommend Scott's Bass Lessons for sure. I mean, definitely an excellent resource. So many places that can branch off from there. For guitar, there's so many that that I like, but Tim Pierce is one that I like a lot for his talk on as a session guitar player, and just really solid into the way to make the tones, the way to make the sounds, and a lot of stuff that he goes over. But there's so many. I mean, I could mention 15 different ones.
Who's the one who did the dad rock?
Yeah, that was
I like him.
Venus Theory was one of the ones we were talking about. This was the thing that is not under his name, I don't think. It's Jake. That was Jake.
Jake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not Jake from State Farm.
Not Jake from State Farm. Another Jake.
No, Jake is great. Not just for the guitar advice, but his general arrangement, songwriting advice. Overall, just great music advice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he even had done one a long time ago. We had talked about the four chord progression, whether it's the 1, 6, 4, 5, or whatever progression it was that he chose. There was one progression where he played through basically a medley of, let's say, 40 songs that were all the exact same progression. Now, they were originally recorded in different keys, but once you transpose them all to the same key, it's the exact same chord progression. So all he's doing is changing basically the attack, basically changing the strum pattern and the timing of how he's hitting it, but it's the same exact 4 chords the whole way through the entire thing, but it's going through, and he just does the lyrics for all of those different songs, so you can hear how it's this song and that song. It's Every Breath You Take and this other song, by Katy Perry or whatever, something that totally is completely different.
5 Journey songs in there.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to ones. I think it was even Coldplay was another one where it was such a common. At one point, there was a progression that's so common with Coldplay that you could just do 90% of Coldplay songs with this one progression or whatever it was. So just understanding how those progressions work and how you can not mimic so many different songs, but how you can have so many different songs that sound unique but have the same character because of those changes. That's how you can, just because songs have been written as a 1-6-4-5 doesn't mean you can't write a 1-6-4-5.
It should inspire you. It means that you're not really mimicking. Once you give a progression your own flavor, your own feel, it is now yours. That is the part of songwriting that is where you get to be you. The 1-4-6-5 is that makes you the music. It's how you attack it.
It's what you do with it, absolutely. And that's where, at first, you might feel like if you're a beginner guitar player or piano player, you might feel if you were doing a 1-6-4-5 in the key of C, that you have to hit each of the chords in the root position and just kind of hit them once. But then later on, you realize maybe you can and start doing like breaking the chords up and then. And you can just do things like that. And that's just a minor change. But once you realize you can do that, it opens everything up. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, every time I go to this 1-4-5. Sounds so simple, but how you can build that, how you can build off of that.
And you can do anything you want.
Has a totally different feel when you use it as a walk down. It is that progression we all know.
Oh, yeah.
As a walk down, very recognizable. When you go
Exactly.
up, it has a totally different. Doesn't have that going down feel.
Now, another thing that you can do is have it go up the entire way, where if you started low enough with a 1 and then to the 6, comes up, and then the 4's up, and then the 5's up. So you're actually going all the way up like that, starting down there, and then the 6, the 4, and the 5, or you could invert the 5 or invert the 5.
You're playing them all in root.
That was in root position just to get that much separation to get that far. Because it sounds totally different now because it's climbing that far.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of it now.
Yep. And like you said, you could use inversions to keep them closer together, but still have a rising overall character to the chord because of the way, whether it's the top note or whether it's all of them together, but starting with that C in the middle there, when you're going to that from there to the 6, rather than going up to the 6, or you could use the inversion where you just bring, so you're only changing one note from the C, E, G, you go for
That's my go. When I
Yep.
first started playing, that's exactly was the most comfortable. Like root,
Yep.
inversion, and
Yep, keep it in the same neighborhood.
And
Oh,
they're
sorry,
all
we
nice
went to
and
the
close
5,
to each other. So that's a natural approach for that.
Yep. And again, you can build that progression. That's where the songwriting aspect comes in, and the note choices are, or the voice leading. Where do you want that highest note to go? So in the beginning, we're starting with that root 1. Okay, the G is the highest note, and then if we're going to go to that A, it's now an A. We're keeping it an A for this one, and then we're coming to make it a B. When we come up to here, if you make it that B, then you get that highest note.
Your timing approach, just like the chord approach, your time approach can really change those chords too. Because
Oh yeah.
let's say you hold on one of them, like hold on the C to the A.
And that's where it opens so many opportunities with timing.
And a little bit of timing change does change the flavor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's all just in one progression in one key that we've been messing around with here. And it does sound like the same thing essentially, but you can change that. I mean, if I put on all these different rhythms, like if we started at rhythm 1 and started playing something in that style.
If you start playing a 3/4 rhythm, you're gonna play those chords a little different than a 4/4.
Exactly. And that's where, like even, yep. I'd almost change it to 40 beats per minute. It's like, no, we don't want to fall asleep. It was at 90. There we go.
That's a stoner tempo.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah, play this progression on me.
On weed. All right, let's see what they do with World Pop on same progression, but starting with. Big finish. World Pop. They are not messing around on that one. Like that 6.
Yeah, that finished big.
I was surprised on that 8-beat one that it didn't have any finish, and that one was like, okay, that made up for all the ones that are missing. But then soul. same
That's a pretty cool.
And then the big finish. I keep it in C for the finish for some reason. They all kind of play something funky on the way out.
It went into horror music. All right, that's a Jeff Beck finish.
There you go. Nice one. And again, it's just all about whichever one it goes into. Like they'll all have that slightly different feel. But what I like doing with the, especially with that Casio chord mode, is see what it does with the chords. See how it breaks it up. See where it throws in those little pieces of rhythm, those little pieces of, those little riffs in between. Like those are the kinds of things where my ear will jump to that, and I'll start figuring that out. Whether I'm playing guitar or bass or keyboard, I'll figure out how to make that little riff, and then I'll put it kind of in the back of my head. I'll put it in the little library there, so that later on I can try to pull that little line out and know how to play it. So that's where, grabbing those nuggets and using the tools that are here. You might not want to have any songs ever recorded where you're using these rhythms that are built into a Casio, for example, but you can use them as a starting point to get your stuff recorded. And once you have something that's locked in, for example, if you locked in on that rhythm and manage to record something where it stays locked into that rhythm, then later on you can take that track out and put in a real drummer who then joins in and puts in whatever he wants. A little bit.
But I'm here to say.
Big finish on this.
Doesn't sound like Beastie Boys anymore.
It might be a little slow for Beasties, but big finish. little bass break.
Oh, I like that kind of finish. Kind of go out smooth, and
And that's a pop shuffle.
I like the outros that kind of break it back down. You know, just like I like my intros to come in one layer at a time and build up.
Yep.
I like my outros to kind of do the same thing.
Yep. And I don't mind if everything fades out together, as long as it almost sounds like everyone's just playing more quietly, because that's something we like to do in practice also. It's basically a dynamics practice, but we'll be playing full volume, and then we're getting towards the end of a song, and we'll just start playing a little quieter, somebody does, and we just all kind of follow along until the song just kind of whispers down and then hold a note down in the end.
Yeah, and that's something good to practice individually and as a band.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do that one night. We'll have a dynamics night.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll
Dynamics, yeah.
focus on the dynamics.
Absolutely. That was
tricks
one.
to really get your music in and out.
Mm-hmm. It's important, and especially if anybody's just learning keyboard, for example. There's a big difference between that and that. I mean, you can hit things hard or loud, but it's fun, but it's not meant for every song. Sometimes there's a lot more pressure, and a lot of times they'll describe it as like when your hand is coming down. You can probably just barely see my hand there, but as it's coming down, kind of like the wrist comes down, and you don't actually hit the notes until almost at the bottom for a really quiet sound, like you're just barely letting the fingers come down. But if you're hitting loud, you're kind of leading with the muscles to kind of slam that in there.
Yeah, and also, like we talked about before, where you hit on the keys. Like
Oh, yeah.
I'm playing down at the bottom,
That's where you have the most control.
up towards the top. I play a lot softer as the key than at the bottom of the key. The bottom of the key is like, that is where you can really pound.
Now, technically, it's also, to me, the end of the keys is where you get the most control, because that's where the key has to move the furthest to get to where it triggers, so you can take the most time to get there, where way up inside, the key doesn't have to move as far. But I'm not really a fan of playing too far up the keys, because sometimes you push and it doesn't quite register because you have to push really hard.
Exactly, and with controllers, like down here, especially with the weighted keyboard, I get the full 127 levels.
Right. Yep.
Of dynamics.
When you're trying for the top top
As
level.
I
yeah,
go up, as my fingers go higher up the keys, you start to lose parts of that.
Yep.
You go from 40 to 110 in MIDI level. You don't have the full 0 and the full 127.
And it makes sense because, again, you have that much resistance when you're pushing at the end. You have that weight, resistance
Yeah,
there.
well,
So
well,
you're halfway up.
there's-
Doesn't have to
there's
travel
more
as far, but the same
snap.
resistance.
Yeah, there's more snap as I go up. But it's
Exactly.
also a lot harder to play precise, because now I've got these other keys in between my fingers, and my fat ass fingers will take those keys down with me.
I hear you, yeah. And that's where, when I do listen to Jeff play, a lot of times it's not all about precision. It doesn't have to be the right note all the time. Like, he can do little, smushes, coming around something to try to land somewhere. And when he's doing it in context, it sounds awesome. When I try to do it as a demonstration, it just sounds like I'm hitting wrong notes. But when he manages to get it in there, he's got something going on with the left, whether it's some kind of a bass line or just some kind of a low chord, implication. Like, sometimes it's just the root and the 3 somewhere. Like, that's where I like when I try to, if I'm doing a big, with this in the other mode, holding a root and the 3rd above is a 10th. And for me, I can reach that because of the hands again. But to me, that's perfect because that's implying enough about the chord, because that's the root and the 3rd an octave above. So the 3rd isn't right next to it, where it sounds kind of muddy. Or if you played it up here, it sounds like a little dyad. But when you have it spread out a little bit, to me, it sounds a little bit better. So if I was doing something else on the right, you're already implying that C major with just those 2 notes. Same way if I was playing, yeah.
And that's just bouncing on one note.
Yep. And then go down, and then it would feel like it would go down to the G, which would be the G and then B.
Yeah. G or A.
Yep. And then down to the F below that. Yep.
Yeah, with
Exactly.
that progression, G or an F would work. both the G and the F.
Yep. And you could even go to that A after that. Like if you went, because
I
that's,
was gonna say I was
yeah.
gonna throw an A in there anyway.
See, I like finishing on that G, come back to the C, just because, again, that 5 likes to pull back to the 1. So like the 4 and the 6, I could switch back and forth. So I could do like a 1 6 4 5 or a 1 4 6 5. I think it usually sounds better with the 1 6 because you're going from the major to the relative minor. So those two definitely sound nice together because it's 2 of the same notes already. And then you go to the 4 where it's 2 of the same notes again, and then you finish at that 5, which pulls you back to the 1. So I like the way that one goes around. But you can do them in any combination.
The nice thing with this kind of progression is you get to bring in those seconds and fourths.
The suspended chords, absolutely. And that's a beautiful way to use them. Absolutely.
And I'm sure that probably is a Journey song.
Oh, that's a couple of them, yeah. I was saying Highway Run, yeah.
Highway Run. Not a Journey song, it should be.
It definitely is. I think it's at least 3 different Journey songs, to be
Yes,
honest.
I actually, at this point, I think it might be a little bit of separate ways too.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me. And that's actually on my project list. As far as you probably have some, if not all, of the Journey songs already done in your library, so I'm going to have to take a look.
If you need to learn any Journey song, I do. Yeah. I have pretty much everything from their library.
Because like with my ear the way it is, and being able to actually look at a project where if it had the piano roll of the piano part and I'm watching it like there, like I'd be picking that up in no time. So that's something that I should do and get used to.
That's how I learned every piano part for a Journey song, was watching the piano roll.
Yep. And that's another good tip is, having the songs done. And again, doing covers. One of the great things about it is you're learning how to get those riffs that you hear, that you like the way they sound in your ear. You're getting them into your hands so you can use them.
You're using that progression in a way that has been commercially successful.
Yes.
So learning a progression in a way that's been commercially successful will help you to take that progression and make it your own.
Exactly. And making it your own is the important
thing. You can't copyright a progression. I don't care what anybody says.
Yep. And that's also where we looked at a couple of different, whether it's chord packs or whether it's somebody just having a top 10 progressions or most popular progressions. Like we looked at, I want to say it was on Hook Theory the one time. We were looking through some of that stuff, and it was showing all these different ones.
Hook Theory is great for analyzing like everything we're talking about here. Hook Theory is an amazing resource for understanding what makes things hooky, what makes things sound good, which chords go nice with which.
Mm-hmm. And it has essentially a built-in AI library of, if you start a chord progression, you say, okay, if I'm going from C to A minor to F, and then I'm say, what's next? Like it can show you, 85% of songs went to G next because that's what it does. And then,
that's what I love about it.
But 1% did this.
You're getting statistical data over like songs that have utilized that kind of progression, which
exactly
fantastic information to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that, you might not want to go that way. You might look through the ones that are the lowest percentage. So, only 0.001% of songs went to, F sharp minor flat 3. And you're like, what? And so you try that chord and you're like, ooh, or whatever. You say, that's a nice one.
Either you're going to hear why it's such a small percentage that does that, or you're going to hear something and be like, well, why don't more people do that? Because that sounds cool. And sometimes you might be the musician who introduces the world to that 1% sound, and
and sometimes it's because somebody was doing a solo at that part, and the note from their solo triggered into part of another chord, and so the chord got misinterpreted as something different because there was another note coinciding, for example.
Or the simplest explanation, I think, is that the record companies like to have pre-made recipes. When it comes to TV shows, they want something that's already been done, tried and true and proven.
Yeah.
When it comes to music and the music companies, they tended to decide what they wanted to put out there into the commercial market was what they considered like the proper way to do these progressions. Sometimes you had bands that were like, no, we want to do it this way. And, the record company's the one who pays the bills. So if commercial music tends to sound a lot alike and bland, you can blame the record companies more than you can blame the artist there, because they're the ones who decided like version of the song.
And at the same time, you were talking about it before with the formula, the formula that worked or the formula that works. And a lot of times the record company would be, saying, hey, we're going to do it this way because this is what works. And then,
you
they have
can't
the
blame
metrics
them.
for some of that. So
You can't blame them when they're all the money saying, "Oh, well, I want you to cook this way," but at the same time, it's nice to see when artists have that creative control to decide how they want their. A lot of bands have fought for their sound. With their
and it depends on, what they're fighting for. Like, is that the hill you want to die on? Like, does a song have to have 7 F-bombs in it, or can we work around that? Just for a wider, radio play, for example. There's certain things that you do have to keep in mind when you're making your song.
Or does my 7-minute song have to be 3 minutes? Because that's always been a big one for a lot of bands.
Does it need the 5-minute solo? That's the question.
Yeah. And sometimes there's legit arguments. Like sometimes the record company has a legit argument, and another time, the artist should fight on that hill.
And again, sometimes what they would hear.
Queen Bohemian Rhapsody is a perfect example of, like, Freddie Mercury was like, well, fuck you. If you don't like it, you don't the best thing since sliced bread, then it's not going to stop us from making that song.
Right. What a good song.
Yeah, it's so out of the box. You understand why, like, the record company was like, what the hell are we going to do with They're not listening to opera on rock radio.
And then it kicks in.
No.
And then it kicks in, and Wayne and Garth get into it. And it's all good. Looks like we got snow over by Tony again. 2 feet so far.
Well, it finally stopped, so
Nice.
until the next one.
That's crazy. That is too much. Actually, it's been just about an hour again, so we should probably put in quick little break time here. Give everybody a chance to stretch their legs. It's always good. Don't want to be sitting around more than an hour without getting up to stretching. Little stretching music. And there it is. Stretchy stretch time. We'll give you a quick little video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more music. I'll probably have my acoustic in a better position then, so maybe I'll play a couple things. I won't play like full songs, but I'll maybe play just a little bit so we can hear the tone of the guitar, and then we can talk about it. Because I have to move the mic to different positions to play or talk, so we'll try that.
We're going unplugged.
A little bit, just a little.
Stay tuned.
Just to hear the tone of the Angelica guitar. In a few moments. Ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Yeah.
Now for me that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can stretch. With this AI, like, stretching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the
I
right
didn't
spot.
even notice 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.
Oh, it's always inspiring when I hear you say that.
That one. There it is. Missed
There
that
he
button,
is.
didn't I? Now, let me mute for 1 second so you don't get the big squeak when I change the altitude on the mic here. But 1 second. Now, that should be better as far as altitude goes. But can you hear me all right when I talk?
Yep.
All right. So, this is what the guitar looks like. It's an Angelica. Is the headstock there?
Oh, he's got wood.
And the question is if the mic is going to cooperate with us.
Oh, yeah. Coming through
Nice.
good. Serenade me, man.
There you go.
Can you sing Italian?
Mamma mia.
Jordan.
Yeah, and that's where for me, this one in particular just has a really nice, rich tone compared to most of the other acoustics I've played over time. Let me see if I think I had a better camera angle here. Put the mic over.
Green Glen.
Yeah, I'm over
The
here.
Glen tones.
I'm all over the place. So that's kind of what she sounds like.
Little Floyd in there, huh?
Little Floyd, that's one of the ones I almost always go to. It's almost a requirement in this case. But let me see here. Go back to this real quick. I'm going to mute again while I change altitude. Because otherwise that squeaks, and that's no good. All right. So that's probably better. But that's what she sounds like, and that's one where, in terms of style, like I never really used to play much individual note stuff on an acoustic. I would play mostly just like chord stuff like that, and just get the structure for a song. And that is one of the first songs that I learned how to play on guitar. So I mean, that's one of the songs that I would play during those years, decades almost, where I had almost no guitar playing skills, and I would just be able to like kind of make that song kind of work, and then that was it. But now I can do lots more. I do things like in minor keys and do jazz stuff a little bit, but it's like that's the kind of stuff that I'm just kind of starting to scratch the surface on. So it's more that I just feel more comfortable now with all of the regular chord songs, songs that are in regular keys.
Now you're scratching the surface on the acoustic side with that, because I mean you've got those grasped over on your bass on the keyboard. Now you're applying it to the acoustic guitar.
Yep. And again, the sound that comes out of that, and that was just fingers. That's not a pick, because again, with the pick, a lot of times it'll sound even brighter to me, and it almost sounds not inauthentic, but it doesn't sound as warm to me, the acoustic. So like for me, I love doing the acoustic with just finger style, and I'll just like not even fingernail, but just like the meat of the thumb, just kind of drag it across.
Not only would I rather play with my fingers on the acoustic, I prefer the sound of finger picking on the acoustic than pick picking.
Yeah, and some they grow the long fingernails, and they'll get into that like really fast style, which I also love. I mean, I've heard Pat play some Spanish style guitar that's amazing, like in that style as well.
Exactly. When you get into the like fancy acoustic, like the Italian classical or flamenco, then it gets interesting.
Oh yeah,
but
that's where
that's advanced acoustic playing. It takes years to get comfortable with those styles. It doesn't
and some of
happen
them
overnight.
Some of them were even picking patterns, like they were saying, Travis picking style, and there's a few different, very specific picking styles that you would recognize when you hear them. That can really open up entire styles of music that you might not have played before. That you heard it, you were like, oh, I wish I knew how to do that. And then once you learn how to do it, it's actually mechanically relatively easy, or relatively simple, I should say. Not easy, but simple. There's not a lot to it, but it takes a lot to be comfortable and get it to come out smooth. Kind of like with drums, like doing the paradiddles, like digga 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 digga. If you go back and forth like that, it should be very smooth, but a lot of people would have difficulty making it sound as smooth with the left starting as they would with the right starting. And that's one of those first things to kind of practice on, to try to smooth that out so that you're getting both hands equally represented in what you're using there. Just as an example.
And I'd agree that when it comes to like acoustic guitar, it's a great instrument for phrasing, working out a song. I think some of the best like songwriters out there, the singer-songwriters, they just grab an acoustic and they start to flesh out the words, they start to flesh out the melody, and an acoustic with that kind of creativity, you could write a million hits.
Yeah, and the same holds true that I've seen. Piano players do the same, and I like that
It's
as a
so
different style,
hard, though, to play the piano and sing.
different style of songwriting. But yes,
I could see myself singing and playing acoustic, but singing and playing piano, I've been trying for
part of
my
it to
entire
make it
life.
to make it easier. Try doing just the chords with the right hand, for example,
Yeah,
and just
that-
a bass note with the left hand.
That's
And-
about all I can do. If I'm doing like simple, just holding a chord, and then I'm more focused on my singing because I have to concentrate on the singing at
Oh
that
yeah,
point.
so do I. Yeah, and I'm starting to explore singing more while doing bass. So like they put the mic in front of me a lot more at practice when I'm just playing and we start doing whatever song and they'll move the mic over because they see me trying.
You got that smoking baritone. Everybody wants some.
Yeah, and again the trick is like you were saying, certain instruments are easier to sing and play with than others, and bass to me has been the hardest. Where I could see myself singing with keyboard or guitar more easily, just because the same thing. You can just kind of hold a chord, or you can hold back a little bit, timing wise, and not play something. Whereas bass, you kind of need to be there on every hit, because
Yeah,
the
in
bass line kind of
bass,
holds the
you
song
can
together.
you can have unusual hits and rhythm going on in the bass that might be counter to the melody. Like, you see a lot of bassists who are background singers, and in
Yep.
that case, when they're singing, it's at a spot that complements what they're playing.
Yep. And sometimes it's only two words, like they're just
When
hitting
you
on those
see
last
Geddy
notes.
Lee, when you
Yep.
see a Geddy Lee
Oh,
who's
man.
singing leads
Yeah,
and
yeah.
going with the bass, that's mind blowing.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one, I mean, he's one of my heroes for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
playing some of that, I'm still working on Red Barchetta. That's one I haven't revisited, not Red Barchetta, Villa Strangiato. We started that one like probably over a year ago at this point. It's been a while.
No
But I
lie,
put that,
Glenn, I was
yeah.
watching a video earlier from a YouTuber that was analyzing first listen to La Villa.
Nice, yeah. Blown away,
Yeah,
right?
I was like, oh man, I remember the first time I heard it.
Yeah, and it is. It's one of those. I mean, it's got so many parts to it. It's got so many different dimensions to it, and it's just such a great song. And it's one that I started going over on the bass, and there's just certain parts that are I'm still having trouble with. So I just want to give it. I want it to be a good representation before I do anything with it. But I know I think RJS did his parts on that like over a year ago at this point. It's
Oh, RJS will jump on something like a man.
Yeah,
Like
I
a
got to get
piece
back
of
to it is the
meat.
main thing. Must get back to it for sure. And a lot of times when people do send me stuff to put bass down on, a lot of times I do try to keep it very simple on the first go round. So like I'll try to do something where I'm just kind of sticking to something very basic and just throwing in little flair here and there, but mainly keeping very
This
background,
one
very
has-
back.
This one has no simple moment.
No, that's the thing is when you're trying to do that, you have to be all up in there to get that sound out for sure. And again, it does have different nuance, different sections that are all completely different. But when you hear what's happening, and then you realize that there's even more happening than you realize, because when some of that high stuff goes on the bass, you might attribute that to the guitar or something else. But no, that's actually happening on the bass also, in addition to everything else that you were listening to.
He must have used like 3 different basses to do that whole damn
And,
song.
and it's usually 4 strings, like it's from what I recall, it was all 4 strings too, like not 5 strings and just going nuts on a 4 string. So kind of like with Victor Wooten, like just being able to make all that sound with just a 4 string. Not really taking links tonight, official Joshua, but you can send them over to Angified, and she'll try to get them involved in for a future show. So
Yeah,
always
DM
appreciate
at
it.
Angify. That's the best way to get heard.
Exactly.
She listens.
And I want to say, let's see, Wednesday nights and possibly Friday nights. Sometimes does she also do links Tuesday nights now? Like she's doing a couple of different nights now.
No, Tuesdays is Chris Lipe and Upside the Hurt. So
Yeah.
Wednesdays,
I think
Fridays.
I saw her sneak in there on a Tuesday one time, but that was probably a special occasion.
or if you got metal,
Oh yeah, Monday.
always hashtag it Metal Monday.
Metal Monday.
You just got to do it before Monday.
Yeah.
Tend to go through their list over the weekend. So.
That's right. They'll build a list before the show because it's better to do it that way, honestly, because that way they can be sure that they're bringing quality stuff to everybody and that they've vetted the things and make sure that a song that is tagged as metal is actually metal. It's
It's
important.
in the major leagues. Did you guys win? Oh,
Nice.
Practice. Well, hopefully you're practicing to win. What team?
January baseball.
Yeah, technically, the good players play all year.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, Braves, Atlanta.
Nice. Very cool. What kind of stuff would you have in your
Good
links?
team.
Do you sing or do instruments or everything? The Beavs. The Braves. Home of the Braves. Very cool. We did some hockey music before, right? Charge.
Oh, he's one of those everything musicians. I know
Nice.
the feeling.
Yeah, yeah. Everything is
I'm-
always good.
I'm trying to learn everything
Yep. Now, in terms of
But
styles, that's the other
from
thing.
a
Is like
keyboard perspective.
some people kind of feel themselves as mostly rock, mostly metal. I'm kind of all over the map. I do some kind of reggae stuff here, and Latin stuff there, and rock here, and classical there. So throwing in different styles and different instruments, it's good to me. I like to be exposed to all different kinds of music because you can pull different things from different places. Country, you get that country bounce going on, and
Yeah,
certain walk downs.
Some styles will complement each other. I mean, I started as a classical guy with music, but lent itself to a lot of rock, country.
And then that's where sometimes a lot of people have blurred that line too, where a lot of country is kind of country rock, or a lot of rock has that country side to it. So it's hard
Yeah.
to put it in one box or the other.
Yeah, when you really analyze like the basics of classical music, you realize it's all over commercial music. You just don't always recognize it because it doesn't sound like Bach, but
Yep.
it is actually the same progressions.
Yep. It's still those same 6 chords and that one that we don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
So if you're in any key,
It's
you're
just-
using the same stuff.
It's just played a lot slower because,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, some of the fastest players out there played hundreds of years ago. Bunch
Yep.
of show-offs.
Yeah. And they didn't even have the equipment to really, do what we do these days. Like
No,
the fact that
they were doing that shit on analog.
and just the tools that we have access to now is kind of ridiculous compared to then. I mean, imagine if some of the people with that talent back then had access to the types of tools that we have today, how much more productive they could have been, in terms of what they wrote, rather than having to write down every note on paper. And if you make a mistake, you got to, scratch it all out and start a whole nother page. It's like,
How
oh my
much
goodness.
more arrogant Mozart would be in 23.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And would he be using, what tools would they be using for, their preferred DAW? What syncs in best for their style? It would be
Well,
be interesting to see.
For sure, Mozart would be making fun of all of you for whatever tools you were using, and you're not good enough.
That's true.
He was an amazing musician, but like history says,
But he knew it.
He was an arrogant bastard.
He was the best and he knew it. Sure. It happens.
It comes with that kind of territory.
Sometimes. It doesn't have to. They don't have to go hand in hand, but it does, come with that mindset, let's say. And, probably doesn't help with all the affirmations or the fact that so many people confirm, like they're all telling him he's the best and everything else. That's got to, affect that as well.
Yeah, that's what a lot of historians, they don't necessarily blame him. They tend to say it was more the upbringing and people kissed his ass too much. So nobody ever like just smacked him in the head and said, stop being so conceited and.
They just said, oh, it's his way.
Well, he was good. So,
Yeah,
talented child, you want them to thrive creatively. You just don't want to coddle them to the point where he's lucky. He's lucky that, like, he stood the test of time. His music superseded his attitude.
Yeah. And, there's a bunch of music from that time that, has survived to today. But, I mean, how much of it didn't? How much of it came out around that time that never made it through, to us in history?
A lot of composers during that time were in the shadows because of him.
And how many were discouraged from even trying because I'll never be,
Watch
never be as good as
Amadeus.
him.
I mean,
yeah,
Amadeus
exactly.
technically was all about like the resentment of Salieri over like everybody's looking at this damn kid and nobody sees the greatness of my compositions. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And that's some of those things, some of those demons that people need to really, deal with themselves. That's the kind of thing that nobody should allow that kind of thing to take over their whole persona like that. But, It's, again, it comes to the environment that you're in. It comes to what people around you are saying to you and about you and all of that. I mean, all of those things factor in, but you are your own person. You're the one responsible for everything that happens in here. So, everything out here can happen as it's going to happen, but how you react to it is the important thing.
Yeah, and musically, you can overcome anything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There is no restrictions with music except the ones you place on yourself.
Yeah, just like with emotions. I mean, the best music to me is always music that either evokes emotions in me or had a lot of emotion put into it when it was being made, which also would evoke emotions in me. But it's so tied to emotion that when you hear a song, it really does. Whether it's that little bit slower that it's played or whether it's a little bit faster and more aggressive, those kinds of things, little slight nuances like that can make such a difference in the way a song comes across, even on the same progressions.
When I say put yourself into the progression so that that progression becomes yours, it is the emotion. That's what you're putting in.
Mm-hmm.
Play it your way.
Yep. And don't be afraid to experiment. I mean, even what we were talking about before, whatever key you're in, if we're playing in C major, and so we're playing with all the white notes, you know that you're dealing with C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor,
Yeah,
B,
when you
B
should
minor.
be afraid is when you don't want to experiment. If you get caught into that creative ditch where you don't want to experiment, you're just, you feel like you know it all, you got it all, you're doing it, and you don't feel the urge to experiment, you're in a creative ditch.
Now, if we were to take something,
I've been there.
if we take that 1, 6, 4, 5 that we were talking about, right, and instead of doing the 4, so if we go from the 1 to the 6, and then maybe to the 3, and then the 5, it still works, right? 1.
The 3
To the 5.
to the 5?
So all we did is take out the 4 and just put in the 3 instead, the minor 3. And this way we've got 2 majors and 2 minors, so it kind of splits its time happy and sad.
Yeah, the minor really changes the mood there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Where would I go after?
Now a minor 2 also, the D
I tried
minor.
to go back to the 3, but that didn't work.
D minor can work also.
Wow,
And for that, maybe D minor down to the C.
going in the second, huh?
Yeah. Because that D minor could feel nice either going from the D to the G to the C, or even just from that D minor to the C, where you just kind of, that last little drop down.
Oh yes, the D minor can work.
Yep.
Yes, the D actually adds a nice bridge.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it's got to be an inverted D. The D in root doesn't sound as good.
Mm-hmm.
The D in first inversion.
With that D on top, right? Yeah.
Yeah. With the F on top.
Okay. Yeah, it does sound nice. And that's just one of those where, again, with the 6 chords that we're going to be using, you've got the 1, the 4, the 5. When you've got that 1, 6, 4, 5, you can just pick one. and swap it out. I like to leave the 5 because the 5 back to the 1 just feels like the right spot, where you feel like you're always getting pulled back to the 1 and you're going to land on the 1. But you can also replace that 1 sometimes. You go from that 5, go to the 6, because now you're going from the minor, the relative minor of that 1. So it still feels almost the same, but you're using the minor instead. It's 2 of the same 3 notes, but using that A minor instead of a C, for example, in that key.
I never found a 5 I didn't like in a progression.
Yeah, it sounds so good.
Always works good anywhere.
Yeah. And again, with the sus chords, like you were talking about, 4 to 2s and the 4s, that's a nice way to kind of hang out. Especially if it's a progression where you're hanging out on one chord for a long time, being able to mix in those 4s and 2s, and even just going 4 3 2 4 3 2 2 3 4 2 3 4, any kind of going around the 3 like that can also be really nice. Good ways to make it all work.
Yeah.
In this case, we liked from that A minor going to that 3, the E minor, you're already using 2 of the same notes that you're going to use for that G already.
I can definitely see a piece out of this.
Oh, yeah.
I will give you a new piece to that.
Nice. Nice. I like it.
Well, yeah, the D gives me ideas.
Excellent.
It has a nice break.
Yeah. And that's just, making sure that we use as many of the 6 chords as we can. It doesn't have to always be all 6 chords in a piece, but not being afraid to use more than just whatever you were using originally in the progression is always a good idea. Like, a lot of people get locked into a 1-4-5 or a 1-6-4-5 and they don't go anywhere. But like, canon in D that we talked about before, I mean, that goes through, all 6 chords at some point or
Pretty
another.
much
So
runs through the whole damn scale.
Yep, and that's where you really do get, walking through that whole thing is nice, especially if you were to use it as an exercise. Once you get used to playing it, canon in D, next time play canon in C, or play canon in E, and like by changing to different keys, and you're walking through all of the related chords in that key.
I used to do that as a exercise to
Yeah.
try to get comfortable with the different
Yeah.
keys, because the progression that you get comfortable with, and once you can get comfortable with the key, you can get comfortable with the progression.
Because once you've got that in your ears, then as you're playing it, you recognize if you're hitting all the right notes, or this one doesn't sound right because it should be minor or what have you. You'll hear that when it happens.
Yeah, and I really do like to see every direction that any given chord, where that chord can go,
Yeah.
regardless of major, minor, or anything else. What does this chord sound like when I put this chord next to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, again, going back to the C major, A minor thing, where you're using all the white notes, there's only 5 notes you're not using. So those black notes there, see how they match against things. If you're playing in C major, there's going to be a chord that's going to use that B flat, which is not in, it's not in there. But using that, even just the note B flat on top of
It
C
does work
major.
good though in C major.
Yeah, because that is your, that's now a dominant 7, because you took it instead of the major 7, instead of the major 7. We came down to using the minor 7 with the major 3rd, so it is a dominant 7. And then if we were to use this one, that's like a flat 13, the flat 6, using the A flat. That doesn't sound as good with that 5 in there, but if you were to just do the root, the 3, and that flat, it's got kind of a weird sound to it, but it's not a sound to be afraid of. It's a sound that has a place in certain songs somewhere.
It might be a sound that you use to invoke fear, like like horror music. Sometimes it is the weird chords and weird notes that create that dissonance.
2 at a time, more. Exactly. Getting all those kinds of scary sounds. Sometimes it'll be the tritone, or a C and an F sharp. 'Cause that's the one that's the most dissonant note in there. It's between the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. Just hanging out.
And you know, the greatest composers out there, they weren't scared of dissonance. Like they found strategic moments to utilize it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is not to be afraid of using them as grace notes even. Like if you were playing an A minor, and then you could always, you can throw in an E flat in there or a D flat. So all of those notes, if you're only hitting them momentarily, they're all fair game. So there's no bad notes on the whole thing. So it's like just figure out which ones you want to hang out on, which ones you only want to briefly visit, and which ones you might not want to use right now, but you could if you wanted to make a specific impression, whether it's scary or afraid or spooky or mean or whatever. You can figure out an emotion and make it happen.
Pick your emotion. Yeah, yeah. Just find the emotion in the notes because every note has one.
Mm-hmm. And every interval has one as well. That's where going into okay, here's major third. That's a good one. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, the sixth. The sixth always sounds nice to me as well. That seven, not so much. And then the root. And that's all the ones that are in the scale, but then there's all the others. I like the way that looks on your visualization too. Pretty cool. And then if you use all the ones that aren't in the scale, you got that minor, or the flat seven, the flat six, tritone.
Right.
And that's all of them. All the intervals you can have. I mean, you can add other octaves in between, but
that kind of chromatic approach. I was playing around with that a few months back. That Worm song really got me, like
exactly
half steps and
and spookiness. Yeah.
There's a lot of potential when you start going, chromatic like that.
Exactly.
That's what it is, right? It's half steps, chromatic half steps.
Half steps, yep. And the other thing was when we talked about a fingering exercise, using just these three, using just the index, middle, and thumb, where basically if you're starting at C, you're going to go thumb, index, index, and then middle for that F sharp. So like I'm coming up, I'm only using that third finger when I have to. When there's the E and the F next to each other and the B and the C next to each other is where I'll go with the thumb. But otherwise, I'll just be bouncing back and forth between the thumb and the index.
I really can go with that kind of the thumb pointy. I really can go fast.
Exactly. And anywhere that it feels weird, that's where you'd want to get that middle finger involved.
It's that snapback where.
By trying to keep the thumb on all the white notes. Thumb on all the white notes except when you have two white notes in a row, and that's where you'll go thumb, index on the white notes, middle goes up to the black note, and then you're back to thumb on the white and index on the black. And so that way you're only going to that third finger when you have to on the F sharp and the C sharp.
Oh yeah, on the F sharp, that's where the middle finger really does come in handy.
And it's just those two transitions where everything else is just that bounce. And same thing going down.
A couple times slow.
And get used to going down as well. Same idea where you're only getting the middle finger involved when you have to. Or actually, I'm sorry, I usually use the middle finger on the black notes and the thumb on the white notes, and then only use the index finger when I have to.
See, and that kind of progression, that's really expressive. Like, if you want to get the feeling of rising or falling, that feels like a rise.
Oh, yeah.
That feels like a fall.
And if you have a good bend wheel, like for me, I have just a button, so I'm just up or down. But if you had a bend where you could actually bend that note up slowly,
That's
Yeah, that's another way to get a rise going.
Fancy on me.
Well, you could also do it. You could bend down first as a pre-bend, also, and work your way back up. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and if you make that a really slow bend, then you can kind of make it where
Yeah, piano doesn't really bend like.
But that's where if you did have, let's say, brass, like throw a trumpet on there, and then you get some bends on that trumpet or a harmonica or something. But I think the trumpet sound is usually pretty good on these. And with the trumpet sound, those bends sound really good if you get them in there right, and if you get the expression, your aftertouch and all that, that kind of sounds awesome. And the visualizer doesn't know what to do with the bend; it just keeps one note. I like it. Makes sense. And that's another one where, again, if we were playing in C major pentatonic.
Actually, if I wanted to, I could program the visualizer because you can program any MIDI event into the visualizer.
Nice, yeah.
I could program the visualizer
To have it go like.
I could get it to bend the.
Nice. Bend the visual. Well, again, if you were doing that C major pentatonic, if you were on that D in the middle there, that D can bend up to the E or bend down to the C, and that's a whole step either way. You might have it only set for a half step.
Yeah, how far is this going up?
It would be a whole step if you were going to the. It just takes a time to get there, it seems like.
I think it's going up like a fifth.
Usually I have it set where if I bend up as far as I can, it's a whole step. So I would go from that D up to an E. That's what it sounds like.
Oh
It's
no,
doing.
it's going up. It's going up a step.
Full step, yep.
When I go all the way up,
Yep.
I'm at an F.
Now, sometimes, like with the keyboard we have over Joey's, it had 3 settings for that. One of them was that setting you got there. The next one was to go up like a fourth, and the last one was to go up like a fifth, I think. So it had 3 different options for how big the bend would be. But when it's up to a fifth, then if you're only trying to bend a whole step, it's really hard to get just that. You're trying to bend 20% of the wheel, and it's like, it's really easy to go over or not go far enough.
And depending on the patch, like some patches, it's fine to be bending like a whole octave just on a little
Sure.
slide.
Yep.
For this brass, they chose to set it to a whole step.
A whole step, yeah. And that's where it makes a lot of sense. And you'd be playing essentially, playing minor or major pentatonic.
Yeah,
and
you'd be dropping a whole step or sliding up a whole step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whole step on either side.
Yep. And the trumpet. And same thing from the G to the A.
Yep.
And that's where just understanding where in the scale those bends work out the best. Because again, without having a full 3 half step bend, you can't really do that other part. I heard that.
It is an axle.
Axle F, yeah. Nice. Oh, yeah.
It goes up.
There it goes, yeah.
It goes up an octave.
Yeah, nice.
After Beverly Hills Cop came out,
Yep.
that one.
Had to learn that one. Yep. Even I learned that one. At that time, I wasn't really playing that much piano.
Oh, as a
but I did
synth
have
guy, I was like, yay, finally a song in the top 40 that's about synth.
Yeah. Rare as it was, but it was time, and it was a good one. I mean, that one came out of nowhere too. But it was made so popular, I guess, by the movie itself,
Yeah,
and I guess by the style of the song too.
Harold Faltermeyer, I think.
That's a good question.
I think it was Harold.
Trivia.
Faltermeyer.
That sounds reasonable. I don't think I remember anything else by Harold Faltermeyer, so I think that was officially a one-hit wonder, as far as I knew.
The only other guy that was doing synth stuff back then was the one who had the robots in his video.
Mr. Roboto.
No, it was a pop song, and damn, I can't believe I forgot. It was like it had like rock in its name or something. Rocket baby.
Mm-hmm.
the word rock was in the song, and it was
That one sounded like Def Leppard right there.
it was a totally synth song,
Mhm.
but it managed to make it in the top 10, which back then was rare.
What about was it Aha? Take on Me, like that? You would consider that you got some keyboard part in there as well.
Yeah,
That was one of those.
they made the keyboards more interesting. Flock of Seagulls.
Yep, yep.
A couple bands actually, you know, hey, even Bon Jovi, Runaway.
Sure. And then what? Guns N' Roses had some piano and some stuff, but yeah, that's a totally different story.
Yeah, Axel faking the piano on the video. He's a phony.
Yeah, yeah. It happens. You know, there's some of that in the music industry too.
Oh, Axel's gonna come kick my ass. You know, I played that piano.
Well, he's welcome to come on the show and refute it, and we can talk about it.
Bring it on, Axel.
Tony's got the studio. He can bring up something on each of those monitors there. Get us some details, some facts on the issue.
I can play the song too.
Yeah, there you go. Even better. And that's where, again, using the MIDI files, and that is such a good training ground. So like if you are learning piano or you want to learn piano, like looking into those songs, seeing how the different tracks are put together, seeing what the parts are, and being able to actually see them go by on the piano roll the same way that we're looking at it here with, you can see what the notes are. Oh, and then you try to play them. Oh, it's that. Okay.
Yeah,
and you can
not
pick up
just
parts real
piano,
quick.
Not
Yeah.
just piano. If you're trying to learn a guitar part, you bring up a MIDI file, change the screen to tab. You can see that notation as tab.
Yep.
That's what MIDI is. MIDI is music notation. It is sheet music. If you want to see it as a guitarist, change your view. You'll actually if tab is your thing, all MIDI files can be represented as tab, and a guitarist can learn a part.
Yep.
It's a good learning tool.
Absolutely.
Plus, you can practice it and have accompaniment. So turn off the guitar track, watch it, and let the bass and the drums play while you watch that tab and practice. It's
Yep.
a great way to learn a song.
Band in a box. Yep.
Oh, Band in the Box back in the 90s was like my go-to.
Yep.
That
I
was an amazing piece of software for its time.
That was before I was really playing again. So that was in the time, like that was actually just as I was going to get my bass, which I think I got in 2009, 2008, somewhere in there. But right before I got that, one of the guys that I worked with was a guitar guy, and he was a jazz guy, and he was a lefty guitar player, and he would talk about Band in a Box and say that, like, you know, his wife would, like, he would come upstairs, or, you know, he'd need to go upstairs and get another coffee or whatever, and the band would still be playing, and so he'd get to the top of the stairs and be like, oh, keep going, guys, I'll be back in a minute, you know, like joking with it, because the software was just always ready to, you know, be playing whatever, you know, jam tracks on the fly. It's good stuff.
PG Music. I actually bought Band in the Box. One of
Yeah.
the few pieces of software in the 90s that I have bought. Well worth it.
Yep. And at that point, what I got was I got the bass, and I want to say I bought like 5 or 6 books, where some were like, you know, 101 bass tips for getting started with the bass guitar, and some of those tips are like, you know, about your strings and extending string life and stuff like that, or about how to do tune-up, or how to, you know, do a setup on the bass to get it to where, you know, intonation's right and all that. So learning about the bass rather than how to play bass, really. Others were like exercises on, you know, an entire book on like 1 2 1 2 3 whatever, like, you know, just showing you like really basic exercises on how to work on your timing, how to work on your finger strength, how to, you know, work on your positions, how to learn your notes on the fretboard. But it was just kind of a whole mix of things, as well as books, like the really, really thick books on, you know, here's, you know, 500 songs, you know, in tab form that you could then, you know, learn how to play for bass. And then I had another big fat book for acoustic guitar, another fat book for just guitar in general. So I have all of those resources here that I can just flip through. And now that, you know, being as comfortable as I am with regular chord stamps and, you know, how to play, you know, melody lines and everything else, I could just sit there, flip to a random page in the book and see, oh, that's the title of the song. I recognize the song. I've heard it.
And that's when you're in a comfort zone.
And now I can just make those chords
happen.
happen.
When you feel like I can open up anywhere in here and I'm good to go, you did good.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is I don't usually read, and that's where, like, trying to read music, if it was, you know, Chopin or whatever, trying to read, you know, classical piano music like that, I'm not fast where I wouldn't be able to just put it up in front of me and read music like that. But looking at a book like this, they're showing you a chord stamp. They're just saying, you know, G major, F major, A minor, and like staying up with that is no problem at all. You know?
And I agree. I'm much more comfortable watching, looking at chord analysis and just getting the basic chords.
Yep.
Helps me especially fast. Like I can see the chords and start to feel out like my claws.
Yep, exactly.
Looking at the staff and getting into the minutia
Yep.
of the notes, that's more intimidating, slow for me. I'd rather watch the piano roll than
Yeah.
try to figure out what the staff is saying.
And even rather than looking at the staff, I would rather just listen to the song. Or if it's, again, a song that I recognize and I'm just doing the chords
you're
now.
So fast by ear. I understand why you'd be like, well, fuck that, man. I'll figure it out by ear right now.
Yeah, and most of it, if it is a melody line or a vocalist song line, so many times it is something pentatonic, or if there is something that's diatonic in it, it's like a note here and there. But so much, because pentatonic sounds so good to the ear, a lot of people just default to that as a starting position. So just finding an anchor note and then trying a pentatonic, you'll drop right in. Oh yeah, and there's a reason for that, because that is a pleasing sound.
I have come to learn the reason for that living with you guitarists and bassists the last couple of years.
Yep, absolutely.
I used to hear it all the time, as a kid in the band, and my guitarist would be like, yes, it's pentatonic, and it never registered with me, like how it was being implemented, but,
Right.
all this stuff I've learned with you in the last, 2 years, it makes sense now.
And with the pentatonic, that was one of the first lessons that I had way back when. I think I took 3 guitar lessons in my life back, in the 90s somewhere. And it was, one was the pentatonic scale, one was the minor blues scale. So basically getting the pentatonic scale in there, but also including that, including that blue note in there. So you're just getting past there. So you're going with the, when you're sitting there in, let's say, A minor pentatonic, like we said, and if you start adding in, but you're basically getting that one in there gets that feel where all of a sudden you can slide that into certain songs. And
Peter Gunn.
that was it. Yeah, there's some of that in there for sure.
I know that lick. Yeah, tell me that is not a great lick.
It is,
for the
absolutely.
first time.
And it sounds good in whether it's trumpet or something like along those lines, but especially if you can get a little bit of slides in there. But for me, that slide goes too far. I kind of cheat though by doing that. Like instead of the notes I want to use are the C, the D, and the E flat. But with that whole step bend in there, I went C, D, and then I went to the D flat and bent it up. B flat.
You maniac.
It's a fun song though.
Yeah, that's one where the bends come in handy.
Yeah. And that's in order to make it really feel authentic, you really need those. And whether it's on a guitar or a bass or on the keyboard. For me, the keyboard bends a lot of times with this one in particular, they sound a little too artificial. But if I wanted to actually get a part recorded using bends, I would use that Carbon 61 I have over there that actually has a good bend wheel that I can, program for whatever I want. But it has, I could bet very nuanced with how much I bend on that one, as opposed to this, where it's a button where you're either bending a whole step or you're not. It's binary choice. It's not a slide wheel with analog decisions on it.
Yeah, I really got to try out this V-Beam. I've had it now for in 3 of my keyboards for almost 20 years. And,
The V-Beam.
well, now they call it the D-Beam. In the early days, Roland called it D-Beam, and they changed it. It's essentially a theremin-style whammy bar.
Very cool. Get the little whammy bar action.
It works with lasers.
Lasers, man.
All I need now are sharks.
And put them on their heads and you're all set.
We're going to conquer the world.
And that's right. You finish building your evil genius lair. That's always the best way. I was telling you, I broke out that floor pod the other day and the tones, and I really do like, the explorations there. It's not just about guitar and pedals like that. You can do it in a keyboard as well. Just basically going to a random sound that you don't normally use. Could be one of the, Far Eastern instruments, or an instrument that you just don't normally use. One of the organs, a church organ that you don't normally use. But just try a sound out. Try a scale that you might not normally use. Maybe you don't normally play in E major, so try E major. And kind of work it out and see what it sounds like, and see how you can work with, stuff that's in E major. You got 4 sharps. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7. You wouldn't use them all together, but understanding how to make them all and understanding which progressions you would want to use the different ones in is important. And it's one of the things that you can kind of feel your way through, but it's also, just going through a little bit of theory can make it where it's a lot easier. Like the only time I would really use that dominant on the 5 chord, or if I'm doing like a blues progression, you could do the 1 chord and the 5 chord both as dominant 7s. That's another another one that you'll see a lot, like that A7 and a D7, for example. Going back and forth. And going back and forth between those, where you're getting dominant 7s for the 2, but normally you would only play the dominant 7 on the 5 chord, and if you're just doing regular major minor stuff.
I just noticed another usefulness of ridiculous for real quick memory of progressions. Looking over on the right, you know how when you hit a chord, it shows over on the right side.
The notes, yeah?
Yeah, and BGE, CAD, DBG, what you were just playing earlier.
Yep.
I was paying attention to that. Like, I don't know why I never looked over there before, but I was like, wow. Remember his chord progression literally as 3-letter acronyms.
Yep, little 3 groupings. And that way you also see which inversion I'm using, because you'll see which one is the highest note. So, in this case, you're seeing that the C is the high note, or this way, the E is the high note.
That's the first notice. I was like, oh, his inversion, like the CAD.
Yep.
That's A, C, D.
Hey, Josh, you can send your links over to Angified, and she'll try to include them for a future show.
Wow, we
Tonight
got a
we're
lot of Joshes. We had
we do.
Josh.
That's
Now
right,
we're
and Drip It
doing-
Josh. But we're going to be finishing up here in the next probably 10 minutes or so, as well. So coming to the end of our time together.
I love good collections.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love good collections too, but you got to DM to @Angify.
And
we
then she
will
can check them out. Check them out.
Yeah, if you got good stuff, that's what we're here for.
Now, we left off with some of the other rhythms over here. The question is also on the speeds, right? We were doing 90.
Mine actually defaults to 98 every time I turn it on. I'm getting kind of used to.
98 sounds fair. And then it goes to like ballad. I don't know. Ballad at 98 probably. I mean, I like the bell pattern, but it's a little slow.
Hell sound am I on?
Probably the trumpet. Big finish for the ballad.
Really fucked me up with that tempo change.
Oh. Gotta play both sides. That's the big finish when you don't have a chord selected. And then Fusion Shuffle.
So anytime they use the word fusion and stuff, I get a little suspicious. So, you know,
It's fusion energy, man.
fusion jazz and fusion rock.
What if it was in, I don't know, E minor?
E B. That's where the B comes in handy. B works great with
Take E minor to B minor?
E. Yeah. And you don't have to hang out long on the B. It's just a bounce.
Yep. I like that bass part. Now, I am curious what they're going to do for the big finish on the bass here. How much bass do they put in the big finish?
Oh, with this beat, it better have a bass Oh, that's a good finish.
Nice.
That's an NBC style finish.
And that
Can
was
we
in
still
E
play
minor.
Dre? You mean Dr. Dre?
Can we play Still Dre? Not for tonight. We're not really doing links this evening.
Nah, I don't.
And
Really
we're just
do
about
requests.
finished. But we do have drums.
I've never been a request guy.
Not even when people say, shut up! Because that's not a valid request.
Yeah, that's the E.
Yeah.
Got a couple of pieces this year with that whole. And then I dropped to the A. And now it's a G. And then everything gets fucked up and we go to F. Sharp minor.
I heard F before the sharp.
It was a fucked up idea I had.
I like it.
But it shifts over to F sharp minor for a little while. And it goes into moshes on F sharp for a little bit, then goes back to the E. I was thinking of Tchaikovsky, not him, but you know that there's some Russian composers who have that kind of like really stomping piano attitude.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to go for that Russian composer approach to.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. And like you said, sometimes very loud, but also very, very emotive. There's the, and that's where a lot of times people don't realize that it's the timing that a lot of times gets that out there, where it's the, it's not always playing exactly on the measure. It's not being a robot and playing it exactly in time. Sometimes that slight bit of a slowing down gives it a slightly sadder feel, all that kind of thing. Being flexible with that timing just a little bit.
It's like being a great speaker. Watch Martin Luther King's speech, you know, in Atlanta, and watch how he actually rhythmatically gives it. And anytime you're doing a song, whether you're playing an instrument or singing, learn from that rhythmatic approach he did there, because that's the most effective speech giving I've ever seen.
Yep. The timing, the spacing. Yeah.
And it's the same with instruments. It's like giving a good speech.
Excellent. And that is the way it works out. And sometimes it is as easy as like a 2-chord progression, like you said. But starting out with that E minor and the B minor, and then having another idea where you said you're going to A to the G to the F sharp.
The beauty of it was once I was on this B, where it wanted to go, like the A to the G to the F,
Yeah.
were all nice options that were totally melodic. Like it just drops down.
And lands so nicely, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can go anywhere because now you don't have to stay in that fucking E minor anymore because now you're technically an F sharp.
That F sharp minor though could technically just be the 2 from that E.
I don't know. Maybe it's not F sharp minor, but like I'm bouncing basically off the F.
In this case, I'm throwing an E on top, which is just putting in the minor 7. So in that case, it's an F sharp minor with that 7. Put that 7 with the E on top. You can put that E on the bottom at the same time. But it sounds kind of crunched that way.
Well,
Sometimes bringing notes too close together can make them sound a little bit dissonant.
actually, you know what? I think I'm playing a C sharp minor. I'm starting with the F on the bounce. But the actual chord that I'm playing is this one. It's C E F sharp.
C sharp, E, F sharp. Yeah. Now that actually, if you were to invert that the other way, so you got the F sharp at the bottom and the C sharp and the E at the top, or the C sharp at the bottom. Trying to figure out which one seems like it does feel like it's the sus4 then, because you're using the root, the minor third, and that F sharp is the 4 instead of what you would normally have in the chord, right? Maybe not. Actually, that does feel, because that's a G flat then. That's why. So that's a G flat and a D flat. You're playing a D flat minor.
Actually, I can tell you what.
Actually, that could
That's
even
it.
just be.
That's it right there.
Right? 3 sharps total, right?
Yes. No, 4.
Then
4.
4?
F sharp, G sharp. I might be in flat. This might be F. G flat minor? Wait a minute.
We could also be in a different mode, so that's the other question.
Well, I shifted to this from E minor. This down. And
To me, it feels like 3
now
sharps.
we are in a different key. Like this is this key.
It feels like it's in the key of A major.
A major. Yes. A major.
Because we're playing with 3 sharps.
F sharp minor, A major. That's what that is.
Yep, exactly. That makes sense.
What I loved about those two scales going back and forth is you could sit on one of them and just riff Grateful Dead style for
Absolutely.
like hours.
And it also has a cinematic quality or background in a TV show or movie quality to it, where it feels like it would fit just right there too.
Yeah.
Very cool.
look, Ma, I can use this high note.
Exactly.
Or was it the wrong GIF?
Well, good effort on grabbing a GIF anyway. Doesn't always have to be the right one. That is funny though. Sometimes you get ones like you think it's this, but then all of a sudden, there's another frame to it where it's like, screw you. You're like, wait, no,
it's
that's
like
not the one I meant.
It's like autocorrect on the phone. It can make you sound like a genius or a fool.
Yep, and it usually goes in the fool direction when it comes to autocorrect on the phone, for sure. I think it's definitely heavily weighted on that side, for sure.
Now that I realize it, I actually play in that F sharp minor a lot. I have a bunch of songs over the last 25 years that use that. I just didn't connect them because starting with the E and shifting down to this key, it feels different when you started over in a different scale altogether.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's one that I used to do in this key.
Very cool. And I think that's
the end of the Hulk. That really sad song at the end of the Hulk.
There you go. There you go. Play just little pieces.
Favorite piano hooks from the 80s.
Nice. And there's a lot of piano hooks out there, but only a few that really kind of draw you in like that, right? And I think that brings us to just about midnight. So gonna have
down to the minute.
Yeah, get right down to it.
Your timing's impeccable.
Well, thank you. And always a pleasure as usual. And you covered a lot of fun stuff tonight. And again, a lot of it is just exploration. Seeing what feels good together, see what sounds good together, not being afraid to just try stuff and see where it takes you. Yep, explore that stuff, and feel free to let us know what you come up with. If you find something cool that you didn't know about before, some progression that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise, let us know. We like to hear about that stuff.
Yeah, we're looking for ideas or people with cool equipment. Gear whores.
Gear
You
whores.
have some good equipment. Be a gear whore.
Yeah. And show it off to the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
But not quite like that gift, though.
Well, you got to give him credit for attitude. the effort's there.
He's trying to sell it, for sure. All right, thanks, everybody, for coming around. And we will catch you guys next week on Talking IT with Glenn and Tony.
Thanks for the jam, everyone.
Have fun.
I love you, oh loves. Do you have those? Do you want